Shabbat Shalom, saints. Psalm 130. Out of the depths have I cried to thee. Abba, please hear my cry. May your ears be attentive, Abba, to the supplications of my voice. For my soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. My soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. If you should mark iniquity, Abba, who would stand? Yet forgiveness is with thee, that they may fear your right hand. For my soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. My soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. Let Israel hope in thee, for there is mercy. Your redemption is plenteous. May you redeem us from our iniquities. For my soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. My soul waits for you, Abba, more than they that watch for the morning. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Shalom, saints. Shabbat Shalom. We have just started the Feast of Tabernacles. This day, Tabernacles is starting. This is the first day of the Feast of Tabernacles. 7 days where we offer sacrifice to Abba, and on the 8th day, prepare a great sacrifice and monumental event to the Heavenly Father. Let's definitely give Abba a round of applause for this Feast of Tabernacles that we have just started. All praises. On. Now, we know this class is called Feast of Dedication. We're going to get into that. Somebody posed a question, I think, a class or two ago regarding, do we keep the Feast of Dedication in the summer too? We're going to get into that. I'll be willing, hopefully, your question will be answered by the end of this class. Let's start off talking about this most important moment because we're right up on Tabernacles, starting this feast. Let's talk about some of the nuances of Tabernacles because many of us are lost on what it's really about. We're even lost on the meaning of Tabernacles. We have no understanding, and understandably so. We've been brought into a land of our enemies. We've been brought into captivity, and we're being taught by those that are claiming to have our heritage what Tabernacles is about. So let's first go and dispel some of these myths about Tabernacles. Let's first start off in Leviticus 23, verse 33, Priest Ira, talking about the commandment and the charge to actually keep this feast.
And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of this 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Most High. On the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein.
All right, so starting on the 15th day of the 7th month, which we have just crossed into in the night watch, according to the city of Adam, we have started the Feast of Tabernacles. And the first day of the feast is a Shabbat. It is a holy convocation. You shall do no work. You must treat this day like it is a Shabbat, a 7-day Sabbath. So if you don't work on the Sabbath, you shouldn't be working today. If you don't go and do your preparatory work on the Sabbath, you shouldn't be doing it today. Anything that you don't do on the Shabbat or that you do on the Shabbat applies on this day as well. Let's read on.
Leviticus 23, verse 36. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. On the 8th day shall be an holy convocation unto you. And you shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. It is a solemn assembly. And you shall do no servile work therein.
All right, so for 7 days, you are to come and offer Abba a sacrifice. Now, this is something we've covered several times over. We don't necessarily need to go deep into it, but this is something that's lost on all the brothers and sisters that are trying to do tabernacles. We're so caught up in going into a tent in the wilderness and popping some sodas and saying, Kwam Yasharala, we're not giving Abba his sacrifices. This was a statute for us to do. You must give Abba a sacrifice all 7 days throughout the Feast of Tabernacles. And then on the 8th day, you have, once again, a holy convocation. That 8th day, which would be a so-called Sunday, is also a Shabbat, a Sabbath. You have these two back-to-back Sabbaths throughout the feast. Let's read on.
Leviticus chapter 23, verse 37. These are the feasts of the Most High, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High, a burnt offering, and a meat offering, a sacrifice, and drink offerings, everything upon this day.
All right, once again, this is what feast days are about. Feast days are not about baking a bunch of food and getting down. It's not about playing card games and Uno and Monopoly. It is about giving Abba his sacrifice. And the sacrifices were supposed to be so joyful, so full of excitement and pleasure that the people had fun. They enjoyed it. When the Most High got his sacrifice, then the people began to eat as well. The priests got to eat. And you offer so many sacrifices, people were getting stuffed to the brim. So much so they couldn't even eat all the sacrifices. They just burn that one. Just completely burn that one to ash and toss it somewhere. But that's why it was a feast, because Abba ate his sacrifices in the fire of the altar, and then the people then began to eat as well. This was the purpose of all the feast days. So first and foremost, if you claim to be doing any feast, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast of Weeks, Feast of Tabernacles, or even a Feast of Dedication, if you're not offering Abba sacrifice, you are not doing a feast. That's first and foremost. Let's finish that up, and then we're going to go to Ezekiel 45:18.
Leviticus chapter 23, verse 38. Beside the Sabbaths of the Most High, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your free will offerings, which ye shall give unto the Most High.
All right, so later on in this chapter, it's going to talk about the booths. We're going to come back there. But let's start focusing on some of the more important parts of this feast, particularly the sacrifices. Let's go to Ezekiel 45 and pick up in the 18th verse, Priest Rasheen.
Thus saith the Most High Abba Yahweh, in the first month, in the first day of the month, thou shalt take a young bullock without blemish, and cleanse the sanctuary. And the priest shall take the blood of the sin offering, and put it upon the posts of the house, and upon the four corners of the settle of the altar, and upon the posts of the gate of the inner court.
So we start to see certain things that most of us as Israelites don't do. He's saying in the first month, the first day, you have a great celebration, just like you did 7th month, first day. Let's read on. What else do we do?
Verse 20. And so thou shalt do the 7th day of the month, for everyone that erreth, and for him that is simple, so shall ye reconcile the house.
All right, so we talked about this. Priest Rashim and Priest Gabaria talked about some of the feast of this month, namely the memorial blowing of the trumpets and the Day of Atonement. Now, Ezekiel is telling us on the 7th day, you start preparing. You start getting yourself ready for the 10th day. Priest Gabaria talked about you don't just come to Abba having done all types of wickedness and sinfulness and say, I'm ready to change. Here's my Day of Atonement sacrifice. You had to start getting ready. Ezekiel said from that 7th day onward, make sure you get yourself ready for the oblations, for that Day of Atonement on the 10th day. You had a memorial blowing of trumpets first month, first day, and a Day of Atonement first month, 10th day. Let's read on.
Verse 21. In the first month, in the 14th day of the month, ye shall have the Passover, a feast of 7 days. Unleavened bread shall be eaten.
All right, so now we see also first month, 14th day, at even, you prepare the Passover and you sacrifice that and then kick off the Feast of Unleavened Bread for 7 more days. Let's read on.
Verse 22. And upon that day shall the prince prepare for himself and for all the people of the land a bullock for a sin offering. And 7 days of the feast ye shall prepare a burnt offering to the Most High, 7 bullocks and 7 rams without blemish, daily the 7 days, and a kid of the goats daily for a sin offering. And he shall prepare a meat offering of an ephah for a bullock, and an ephah for a ram, and a hin of oil for an ephah.
All right. So now we see once again the same sentiments being brought out that you do in the Feast of Tabernacles. You do the same thing in the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the summer. Every single day you had to bring an Abba sacrifice. You weren't just getting together and the priest and the congregation weren't playing Uno. They were giving up sacrifices, and Abba was pleased with that. And because of the sacrifice, they began to eat and have fun and celebrate. Let's read on.
Verse 25. In the 7th month, in the 15th day of the month, shall he do the like in the feast of the 7 days.
Now he jumps from 1st month, 14th day, to 7th month, 14th day at even, starting the 15th day. You shall do the exact same thing. He's telling you that these feasts mirror each other, which we've shown. There are only 2 seasons in a Hebrew calendar. There's summer and there's winter. There is no autumn. There is no spring. You just have summer and winter. And those 6 months replicate in the other season. The 6 months of summer replicate themselves in the winter. So you have a Feast of Unleavened Bread, 1st month, 15th day, and you do it for 7 days. So too do you come the winter season, 6 months later, 7th month, 15th day, and do this for 7 days. These things replicate each other. He said, just like what you read, what I told you to do in the 1st month for 7 days, you are to do the same thing in the 7th month. Let's read on.
Continuing in verse 25. According to the sin offering, according to the burnt offering, and according to the meat offering, and according to the oil.
All right, so in accordance to how you give these sacrifices. Now let's zoom in on this and get a little more details. Let's get Numbers 29 and 12, Priest Ira. Let's start there. Let's look at what he's talking about, because he said do these feasts the same way. However, there are a few different nuances throughout these feasts. They are done slightly differently. And we, as scholars of this information that Abba gave us, must be studied enough to see the nuances and how to actually apply these similitudes between the 2 feasts. Let's get Numbers chapter 29, verse 12.
And on the 15th day of the 7th month, you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work, and you shall keep a feast unto the Most High 7 days.
All right, so we see the same sentiment. 7th month, 15th day, you begin to keep a feast for 7 days. And for 7 days, you offer a sacrifice to Abba. Let's read on.
Numbers 29, verse 13. And you shall offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Most High, 13 young bullocks, 2 rams, and 14 lambs of the 1st year. They shall be without blemish.
So we see, once again, here is the sacrifice that you must offer on the 1st day of the Feast of Tabernacles. You had to come bringing your 13 young bullocks, 2 rams, and 14 lambs of the 1st year, without spot, without blemish. Now, obviously, this is according to Moses' covenant. All those should know that the priest of the house of wisdom does not offer physical sacrifice anymore. We're not taking goats and spilling the blood, burn them on the altar. We offer spiritual sacrifices. But let's look at the point that's being made here. Let's read on.
Verse 14. And their meat offering shall be of flour mingled with oil, 3/10 deals unto every bullock of the 13 bullocks, 2/10 deals to each ram of the 2 rams, and a several 10th deal to each lamb of the 14 lambs, and 1 kid of the goats for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, his meat offering, and his drink offering. And on the 2nd day ye shall offer 12 young bullocks, 2 rams, 14 lambs of the 1st year without spot.
All right, so on the 1st day, you offered 13 bullocks. Now on the 2nd day, you're offering 12 bullocks. Let's jump down to the 20th verse.
Numbers chapter 29, verse 20. And on the third day, 11 bullocks.
All right, on the third day, now you're offering 11 bullocks with their meat offering and their drink offering, and so on and so forth throughout the entire feast. Let's jump to the 32nd verse, Priest Ira, and we'll just skip ahead to the 7th day. This same process is going throughout each day of the feast. Let's read on.
Numbers 29, verse 32. And on the 7th day, 7 bullocks, 2 rams, and 14 lambs of the first year without blemish.
All right, so now when you come to the 7th day of the feast, you've counted all the way down with these bullocks, down to 7 bullocks as the sacrifice throughout the 7 days of the feast. Let's read on.
33. And their meat offering and their drink offerings for the bullocks, for the rams, and for the lambs shall be according to their number after the manner. And 1 goat for a sin offering, beside the continual burnt offering, his meat offering, and his drink offering. On the 8th day ye shall have a solemn assembly. You shall do no servile work therein. But you shall offer a burnt offering, a sacrifice made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Most High. 1 bullock, 1 ram, 7 lambs of the first year without blemish.
All right. And their meat offerings and their drink offerings. So we see on the 8th day, everything culminates, and you offer this sacrifice of 1 bullock, 1 ram, and 7 lambs unto Abba, plus the daily oblation, plus all the vows and peace offerings that all the congregation would bring. Now let's go to the 28th chapter. Let's pick up in the 16th verse of Numbers, Priest Ira, and we'll see how this actually differs a little bit from the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the summer season. And we're going to go back to Ezekiel, that last verse, and then also hold Exodus 13, verse 13, Priest Rashim. Let's go and get that Numbers 28, verse 16.
And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Most High.
All right, so now we're already seeing a difference here. Tabernacles, you start 7th month, 15th day. And then you do 7 days, and it culminates on an 8th day. Here in the summer season, the great monumental event is at the beginning. You still have an 8-day long feast, but the great monumental event of Passover, when you sacrifice that offering, is done the 14th day. Then you do 7 days of unleavened bread, and it's over. While in Tabernacles, it's the other way around. You do 7 days, and then the great day comes, and you have a great feast and festival at the end. It's, once again, just like a mirror. If you look at a mirror, whatever you're seeing is flipped. It's reversed. The exact same thing in the summer and winter reflection. That butterfly effect that's happening. It's the same thing, but just flipped on the side. Let's read on.
Numbers chapter 28, verse 16. And in the 14th day of the first month is the Passover of the Most High. And in the 15th day of this month is the feast. 7 days shall unleavened bread be eaten. In the first day shall be an holy convocation. You shall do no manner of servile work therein. But you shall offer a sacrifice made by fire for a burnt offering unto the Most High. 2 young bullocks and 1 ram and 7 lambs of the first year. They shall be unto you without blemish.
All right, so now look at what the sacrifice was for that 15th day. Instead of 13 bullocks, he says just 2. 2 bullocks, 1 ram, and 7 lambs of the first year. This is what the offering was throughout the feast. Let's read on.
Verse 20. And their meat offering shall be...
Actually, to expedite it, go to the 24th verse.
Verse 24. After this manner you shall offer daily throughout the 7 days the meat of the sacrifice made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Most High.
All right, so after this manner, you offer the same amount of sacrifices throughout the entire feast. 2 bullocks, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. It was different from Tabernacles. Tabernacles, you offered 13 on the first day. Then you offered 12 in the second day. Then 11, and so on and so forth until you whittled it down. You were essentially counting down until that great day. Where in unleavened bread, it was different. Everything was flipped on its head. The great monumental event has already happened. You're just now maintaining until you finish. And then what?
Numbers 28, latter part of verse 24. It shall be offered beside the continual burnt offering and his drink offering. And on the 7th day you shall have an holy convocation. You shall do no servile work.
All right, so on the 7th day, you had a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work, and now the feast is over. There is no 8th day. The 8th day, that great event, is at the beginning in the summer season. In the winter season, is at the end. So let's read that Ezekiel again. Ezekiel 45, verse 25. Let's start to get an understanding of what he's saying.
In the 7th month, in the 15th day of the month, shall he do the like in the feast of the 7 days, according to the sin offering, according to the burnt offering, and according to the meat offering, and according to the oil.
So what is he saying? He's saying you offer the same sacrifice, but we see there's some differences in numbers. He's not contradicting what Abba had told him before. He received the Spirit of the Heavenly Father, the same Spirit that Moses had. He's not contradicting himself. What is he saying? What is he telling us to do? You shall do the same according to the meat offering and the oil that you give with your peace offerings, with your sin offerings. These things do reflect each other. The same way you give the sacrifices, you must do in unleavened bread in the summer and tabernacles in the winter. So what exactly is he talking about? Let's get Exodus 13, verse 3, and get some understanding on this.
And Moses said unto the people, remember this day in which ye came out of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by the strength of the hand of the Most High brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten.
All right, so he's talking about in that first month, 14th day, you shall eat your sacrifices without leaven. There shall be no leaven offered with your bullocks and your rams and the goats that you offer for the Passover and for that feast of unleavened bread. No leaven shall be eaten with your sacrifice. Read on.
Verse 4, this day came ye out in the month of Abib. And it shall be when the Most High shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which he sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and in the 7th day shall be a feast to the Most High. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leavened bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters.
So this is how you offer the sacrifice that you're supposed to give. Yeah, the numbers changed, the amount changed, but here is the statute in how to give that sacrifice. You must offer it without leaven. There was indeed a sacrifice you could offer with leaven. The congregation could partake in a Thanksgiving offering or a vow offering and have no leaven, or have leaven in there, just on a regular day, or even in the Feast of Weeks. The people could offer it with leaven. But in this Feast of 7 days, you shall not do that. Everyone shall eat unleavened bread. Even with your Thanksgiving offerings, even with your vow offerings, it shall all be unleavened. This is how you offer those sacrifices that you were to give during this feast. And this is what Ezekiel is saying is replicated. This is how you do the feast in the 7th month according to the feast in the 1st month, without leaven. It's not about if you offer 2 bullocks in the summer season, you offer 2 bullocks in the winter season. It's not that. It's you offer those sacrifices without leaven. Many people just think Tabernacles is just that. It's its own feast where you do it completely different than you do in the summer season. And we think that Passover and unleavened bread is the only time you eat unleavened bread. That's not the case. Even in Tabernacles, you must eat unleavened bread. You cannot offer any leaven in the sacrifice for these 7 days. And you do that counting down to the 8th day, the great day of Tabernacles. No leaven should be eaten throughout this feast, whether it be the 1st month, 14th day, and the 15th day for 7 days, or whether it be the 7th month, 15th day for 7 days. No leaven can be eaten. Let's read on. And if you would get Matthew 16:1, Priest Ira.
Exodus chapter 13 and verse 8. And thou shalt show thy son in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Most High did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto thee upon thy hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Most High's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Most High brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year.
Wow, this ordinance to eat the unleavened bread of the sacrifice shall be kept year to year in its season, at its appointed time. First month, 15th day for 7 days, and 7th month, 15th day for 7 days. Both of these seasons, both of these feasts shall be feasts of unleavened bread. All right. No preacher talking about he want a hamburger. You got to drop that ambition. No hamburgers, no yeast in the feast of unleavened bread. And I want to pause right here too, because some people think that leaven means it has to be flat bread. People think, we call today baking soda a leavening agent. And that's what they call it today. But what were they calling it 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago? This unleavened or leaven wasn't talking about just making it rise. It was really talking about fermentation. Baking soda does not ferment. It just makes it puff up. Yeast and bacteria is what brings forth fermentation. And it's not saying you can't have wine. Obviously, we know wine was the drink offering. It has already been fermented, and you filter out the yeast and all those bacteria that was bringing forth that fermentation. But in bread, when you put yeast in there, it does indeed ferment and cause that rising. Yeast causing anything to rise is actually indeed a fermentation. Is not even a chemical reaction like baking soda is. Yeast has a whole different process. It's a living organism that's actually eating the sugars and essentially pooping out alcohol. And with that, it produces CO2 and it causes it to rise. I know it's not a science class, but we need to know the difference. That when he's saying unleavened bread or anything leavened, it's talking about fermentation. It's not talking about just simply rising. And there's a reason why he's saying, don't eat this. Don't partake in this. He's not just saying this because he doesn't want you to have something that tastes good. That's not why the Most High was telling us to do that. And it's not even what brothers and sisters say, the bread of affliction. It's not even about that. It's not even about being afflicted, so to speak, at this time. There is a purpose behind not eating leavened bread because we're supposed to replicate this thing in the spirit. Let's talk about this leaven of the spirit. Many of us should know it already, but let's be mindful in this Feast of Tabernacles to execute it. Matthew chapter 16, verse 1, Priest Ira.
The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came, and tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. And he answered and said unto them, when is the evening? Ye say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red.
All right, so the Pharisees and Sadducees came to Messiah and said, hey, show us a sign from heaven, Christ boy. If you God's son, show us something. And the Messiah, after doing countless miracles already, was like, y'all some wicked brothers. You're desiring a sign when I've shown it to you. You don't believe. And I can do 100 other signs. You still won't believe. You can tell the weather. You can say when the sun rises, oh, it's a cloudy day. It's about to rain. But you can't see the signs of the time that a new covenant is here and that I am the Messiah. I ain't giving you no more sign. Let's read on.
Matthew 16, verse 3. And in the morning it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times?
You're a hypocrite. You think you can see all these signs of all these great things and make all these great predictions, but you can't see what's happening right in front of your face. You're a hypocrite, said the Messiah to these Pharisees. Let's read on.
Verse 4. A wicked and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. And he left them and departed. And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. And Yahweh said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees.
You can tell Yahweh was heated after that. Brother went on, they left and went on the boat, and Messiah's still talking about it. Brothers, do not follow after the Pharisees. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. And how did the disciples respond?
Verse 7. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread.
He's like, dang, Messiah coming on harsh on me, man. I know we forgot the bread, but dang, man, dude coming down harsh. Let's read on.
Verse 8. Which when Yahushua perceived, he said unto them, O ye of little faith, why reason among yourselves because ye have brought no bread? Do you not understand, neither remember the 5 loaves of the 5,000 and how many baskets you took up? Neither the 7 loaves of the 4,000 and how many baskets you took up? How is it that you do not understand that I spake it not to you concerning bread, that you should be aware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees?
Say, y'all of little faith or little interaction with the spiritual realm. Don't you remember when the people were hungry? I took all this bread and multiplied it. We had 5 loaves and I made 4,000. And you thinking I'm talking about bread, physical bread. You don't know what I'm talking about? And then they understand. Then it clicked what he meant. What did he mean?
Verse 12. Then understood they how that he bade them not beware of the leaven of bread, but of the doctrine of the Pharisees and of the Sadducees.
Of their doctrine, of their abominations, of their wickedness and their adultery and their hypocrisy that he talked about earlier. This is the leaven that he was talking about, that the Messiah was speaking on. And let's corroborate that in Luke 12:1, Priest Ira. And if you would, Preacher Seem, get Hosea 7:1. This is the leaven that we, especially the saints of this day, are to abstain from. It's not just simply about eating unleavened bread or having no yeast. Now that we should still do it. We should still operate in that way as long as we're in these carnal bodies. But he's first and foremost saying abstain from this leaven of the Pharisees, false doctrines and wickedness, adultery and hypocrisies. Let's pick that up in Luke 12:1, Priest Ira.
In the meantime, when they were gathered together in an innumerable multitude of people, insomuch that they trode one upon another, he began to say unto his disciples, first of all, beware ye of the leaven of the Pharisees, which is hypocrisy.
It's hypocrisy. It's seeing what is righteous and good and you not doing it. It's seeing what is righteous and you are thinking in yourself that you're righteous and you're not doing this thing. You are not following after the Messiah, the Prince. It's the wickedness, the adultery, all types of abominations. There's brothers that will abstain from yeast and still argue with each other. How are you keeping the feast when you still got leaven in your chamber of imagery? You still got this leaven of abominations within you. Yeah, you can abstain from yeast and not eat a pizza or not eat a hamburger. But what's inside of you? What's in your chamber of imagery? Are you engaging this hypocrisy, this wickedness, this adultery? And this isn't even just something that the saints of the New Testament, quote unquote, perceived. Even from ancient times, even in the Old Testament, so to speak, they knew about this. They knew that leaven wasn't just the fermentation of yeast, but it was the wickedness that enters into hearts of men. Let's get that Hosea 7:1.
When I would have healed Israel, then the iniquity of Ephraim was discovered, and the wickedness of Samaria, for they commit falsehood, and the thief cometh in, and the troop of robbers spoileth without.
All right. If you get Priest Ira, 1 Corinthians 5:1. So we see in Hosea, he's saying that Ephraim, which would have been the chief of the Israelites that left the kingdom that Solomon and David built, they began to engage in wickedness. He sought to do a blessing to them, but they were engaging in falsehoods. They were engaging in abominations. They were thieves and robbers. Time won't afford us to go through it, but I was looking at how they broke off essentially. And the priesthood, to be consecrated as a priest in Moses' covenant, you had to bring a bullock and a ram and a goat and sacrifice that and be sprinkled with that blood. That was a consecration for the priest. Now, when the Israelites broke off and tried to formulate their own kingdom, the 10.5 tribes, they made it where anybody can come with a bullock or a goat or a ram and be consecrated. Basically, you got money? Oh, we got this priesthood right here for you. They do the same thing today. You can go online. As long as you pay somebody $50, you can get mailed in a certificate to be an ordained pastor. You didn't do any work. You didn't show any skill. But you just paid some money, and now I'm an ordained pastor. I'm an ordained minister. Israel was doing the same thing back in those days. Oh, you have Gad? You want to be a priest? All right. How many bullocks you got? All right, you hand them up. All right, make that brother a priest. Oh, you a Gentile. You want to be come on up. How many bullocks you got? Come on in. This priesthood right here waiting on you. They just threw anybody into what was supposed to be Abba's holy service. And it was not so. It could not be that way. These brothers were full of wickedness. Let's read on.
Hosea chapter 7 and verse 2. And they considered not in their hearts that I remembered all their wickedness. Now their own doings have beset them about. They are before my face. They make the king glad with their wickedness, and the princes with their lies. They are all adulterers, as an oven heated by the baker, who ceaseth from raising after he hath kneaded the dough until it be leavened.
They are adulterers, just like leaven. You put a little bit of yeast in some dough, that thing is going to rise and puff up. You put a little bit of mold on some bread, that whole thing is going to get moldy. They don't need to partner up and then reproduce and have a gestation period of 9 months and then produce a baby. They just grow. That thing just spreads. They send out some spores and then it catches and it grows. Same thing with sin, with wickedness. Sin is more contagious than COVID. What do they tell you with COVID? Oh, wear a mask, get a shot. And they say you're immune. As long as you keep distant, you can call people, you can have a mask on and quote unquote not get it. But sin, you can send a text message and somebody else got it. You can have a phone conversation and somebody else got it. You don't even have to talk. You can just give a look. You see somebody doing something, you just give somebody a look. Yeah. And they already know. They already know what you're talking about. Oh, we're going to go in the back and talk about him later. Sin just infected somebody like that. This is the most contagious disease on this earth, is iniquity, is sin, wickedness. And this thing starts to spread, just like a baker baking bread. Sprinkle a little bit of leaven in that, that whole dough ball puffs up and expands through that fermentation. The same thing with sin. They have taught many people to engage in wickedness and influence them into that. And this is what we, especially the saints today, are to abstain from. The saints are to abstain from this leaven in this feast of unleavened bread. Abstain from the leaven of malice, of hypocrisy, of adulteries, of all types of wickedness. This is what we must remove in this feast. And Paul told us to do the same thing. Let's get that 1 Corinthians 5. And we'll pick it up we'll get the context. We'll pick it up in the first verse.
It is reported commonly that there is fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. And ye are puffed up, and have not rather mourned that he that hath done this deed might be taken away from among you.
All right, so Paul is writing to the church in Corinth, and he heard a report and is sending a letter back to those judges and the leaders there. It's like, I heard something. A little birdie told me you got brothers in that church taking their father's wife and enjoying that. And not only are they doing it, they're going around bragging about it. Brother, guess what I did last night? Let me tell you about this. Infecting other brothers. And now that brother he just told us, like, what? Really? Let me see what I can do. My father got about 3 wives. Let me go see if I can. This brother is spreading his leaven throughout the entire congregation. He said you shouldn't have been puffed up and proud and boastful. Y'all should have been mourning. They should be like, brother, you did what? What in the world is wrong with you? Brother, remove this, brother. But instead, they started boasting about it, talking about it, probably sharing pictures about it. Like, what are you doing? And Paul is saying, you cannot do this. Let's read on.
1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 3. For I verily, as absent in body but present in spirit, have judged already.
Now, Paul says something powerful there. I'm not there in present to see it. I've heard it. I know it's true. I'm there in spirit. I brought the judgment. I've judged already what you need to do. Read on.
As though I were present, concerning him that has so done this deed. In the name of our Messiah, Yahushua, when you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of our Messiah, Yahushua, to deliver such an one unto Satan for the destruction of the flesh, that the spirit may be saved in the day of the Yahushua.
He said that brother loves doing Satan's work so much. Well, turn him over to Satan. Separate him from this body, because he will destroy it. He will repulse the spirit of wisdom. Take this brother that's bringing all this sin and show him the door and tell him, don't come back because of that wickedness that you did and were boastful and puffed up and proud about. You were not penitent. You were not humble. If you did that thing and you were mourning about it, you were sorrowful about it, the Most High would accept you. He would say, you know what, I know you screwed up, but come back to me and don't do that again. David did some wicked stuff, but the difference was that he was penitent about it. David went and took another man's wife, lay with her, and sent that man off to the front lines to die so we could take his wife. And when it was showed to him the error of his ways, he wasn't like, nah, I ain't do nothing wrong. He said, I'm the king. Yeah, I'm the king. I do what I want to do. Nah, he said, man, I screwed up. But please forgive me. And the Most High still accepted him. But these brothers here, they doing wickedness and they're happy about it. They're boastful about it. They're proud about it. They spread it into all the other brothers. You had one brother try it, now you probably had 50 other brothers doing it. They say, remove every single one of them. Not so that their spirit may be saved. Their spirit is already filled with sin. So that the spirit within the church can be saved and preserved, so that when the Messiah comes, he doesn't destroy that whole church. It's only a few of us and not the whole body. Let's read on.
1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 6. Your glorying is not good. Know ye not that a little leaven leavens the whole lump?
Don't you know that a little bit of leaven or a little bit of sin, a little bit of hypocrisy, of adultery, of covetous, of whatever wickedness leavens the whole lump? Let's take the physical example. Sprinkle a little, all you need is a little bit of yeast, and that thing is fermenting. Many of us know or should know the House of Wisdom is making our own wine. And you have gallons upon gallons of juice of whatever fruit you want it to be. Grape juice or apple juice, if you want to make apple cider. Or we got some pineapple that's coming. It's delicious. I believe we're going to be doing a taste test at the end of the feast.
I concur.
God, I concur. When you have gallons upon gallons of that drink, all you need is to sprinkle a little packet of yeast in there. Come back tomorrow, the thing is bubbling over. The yeast is activated. It just took a little bit. It just took a small amount to ferment that whole big bucket of juice. That's all you need. And Paul is saying the same thing. A little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump. All you need is one person to be filled with sin and start talking like, hey, man, guess what I just did? Yeah, my father was going on a long journey and, stepmom was looking a little lonely. Now this brother's over here thinking about what he can do. It just takes a little bit. It is contagious. So instead of getting everybody sick and everybody dying, separate them and send them on his way. Let him do his wickedness out there. Let's read on.
1 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 7. Purge out, therefore, the old leaven, that ye may be a new lump, as you are unleavened. For even our Messiah, our Passover, is sacrificed for us.
So in this feast, Don't let these brothers that are spots in the feast, bringing forth leaven, come in and partake. Purge out that old leaven and be a new lump as the Messiah. He was only able to be our Passover because he lived with no iniquity. No sin was found in him. He was a man without sin, thus making him an acceptable sacrifice for the Passover. We must do the same. We must now live unleavened, free of sin, especially in this feast of unleavened bread, whether it be in the summer or whether it be in the winter, whether it be first month 15th day or 7th month 15th day. We must all be free of this leaven. Let's read on.
Verse 8. Therefore let us keep the feast, not with old leaven, neither with the leaven of malice and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth.
This is the leaven: malice, wickedness, apostasies, adulteries, fornications, hypocrisies. All these things are leaven, and they bring forth destruction unto the body. But we must all be unleavened, being sincere, being in this truth, in the covenant, following after the Messiah, the Prince. This is what makes us acceptable in the feast of unleavened bread, and this is what we must do. We'll drop that, and if we can go back to Leviticus 23. You still have it, or? All right, now, if you got it, Priest Rashim, Leviticus 23, pick up in the 33rd verse. And if you would go to Exodus 25:1, Priest Ira. So we see that even in Tabernacles, this is a feast of unleavened bread. This is not something that we only do with Passover. This is something we do first month, 15th day for 7 days, and 7th month, 15th day for 7 days. We must be unleavened. And this leaven is not just talking about not eating a nice plump piece of bread. This is talking about within us. We must make sure there is no leaven within us. The leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees must be expelled in this feast. And yeah, we replicate that in the flesh by not eating that leavened bread, but that's not where the focus should be. Anybody can abstain from eating leavened bread, but how many of us can abstain from having leaven and sin in our chamber of imagery? That is the true feat throughout the feast. Now, let's go back to Leviticus 23. We're going to continue talking about some of the things that we must do in the Feast of Tabernacles. Leviticus 23, verse 33.
And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, saying, The 15th day of the 7th month shall be the Feast of Tabernacles for 7 days unto the Most High. On the first day shall be a holy convocation. Ye shall do no servile work therein. 7 days ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. On the 8th day shall be a holy convocation unto you, and ye shall offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High. It is a solemn assembly, and ye shall do no servile work therein.
All right, so we see once again how the Tabernacles is laid out. 7th month, 15th day, you come and eat unleavened bread and offer it with the sacrifice for 7 days. So that's so-called, for our terminology here, that's so-called Sunday to so-called Saturday, 7 days. And on the 8th day, you come and have another Shabbat. That would be the following so-called Sunday, to use our terminology, the first day of the week. And you complete this feast a full 8 days. Let's read on.
Verse 37. These are the feasts of the Most High, which ye shall proclaim to be a holy convocations, to offer an offering made by fire unto the Most High, a burnt offering and a meat offering, a sacrifice and drink offerings, everything upon his day. Beside the Shabbats of the Most High, and beside your gifts, and beside all your vows, and beside all your freewill offerings, which ye give unto the Most High. Also in the 15th day of the 7th month, when ye have gathered in the fruit of the land, ye shall keep a feast unto the Most High 7 days. On the first day shall be a Shabbat, and on the 8th day shall be a Shabbat.
All right, so there's another trick and deception that starts to come to our people. All right, once again, continuing talking about the Tabernacles, the Feast of Tabernacles, we shall come 15th day and do it for 8 days. But let's read on.
Verse 40. And ye shall take you on the first day the boughs of a goodly trees, branches of palm trees, and the boughs of thick trees and willows of the brook. And ye shall rejoice before the Most High your Abba Yahweh 7 days. And ye shall keep it a feast unto the Most High 7 days in a year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. Ye shall celebrate in the 7th month. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths.
All right, so now we have our people who have learned from the desert penguins. He who hath an ear, let him hear. We learn from them that we're taking these branches so that we can build a hut, a campsite, and live within it. And now you got Israelites doing tabernacles, going out into the woods, pitching a tent, and yelling, Kwam Yasharala, I'm keeping tabernacle. Because we see this. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. Let's read on.
Verse 41. And ye shall keep it a feast unto the Most High 7 days in a year. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. Ye shall celebrate it in the 7th month. Ye shall dwell in booths 7 days. All that are Israelites born shall dwell in booths. That your generations may know that I made the children of Israel to dwell in booths when I brought them out of the land of Egypt. I am the Most High, your Abba Yahweh.
All right, so they start to see, or we start to learn on tabernacles, you go and pitch a tent and you dwell in it for 7 days, because when Abba took the children of Israel out of Egypt, we lived in tents. So we got to remember that moment. Now, I would always look at that like, I mean, I guess, like, sure. But why does the Most High want us to remember that? He wants to remember that we lived in a tent? Why? We can say humble? I mean, I guess. But anybody can tell you that. You got all types of Facebook live streaming gurus talking about be humble. Wherever God puts you, make sure you stay humble. Make sure you don't forget what you came from. Most High wants me to remember that? That's really what he wants me to remember? That I was living in a tent? I mean, I guess. And if he decreed it, sure, we would do it. But this is not what he said. He is not telling us, pitch some tents and live in there. It makes no sense. Mm-hmm. Let's look at the word, right? Many people already know it, Sukkoth. Let's bring up the word. It's not really Sukkoth. It's sukkah. H5521. Let's bring that word up, right? We see that, if for those streaming live, you'll see it on your device right now. We see Feast of Tabernacles. That's usually how it's translated, but on other occasions, they translate as booth. And when you start looking to the Strongs, they start telling you it's a cottage, it's a hut, it's a rude or temporary structure. But you only see this word, sukkah, when it's talking about tabernacles. So where they extrapolate from this that it's a tent, a booth, a hut, where do they get that from? Why are they putting that on there? Because if we were to go into the Hebrew, where it talks about they were in a tent, for example, when soldiers would go out to war and it said they pitched the tent, there's a completely different word. It's the word ohel. We're not even going to pull it up. But that's the word. Completely different word, not even related to this word. So how in the world did they get that this was a tent, a rude or temporary structure? And why would the Most High want us to do that? Build yourself a house, and then on 7-month, 15 day, go outside and pitch a tent. Don't live in your house. Why? This is not what he's saying. Now, this word is not the root word. This is essentially the composition of another word. We can pull up the root word of this. H5526. Sakak. This is what that word is. Let's pull that up, and we'll see what it says. It says covering, defense, something to overshadow you. This is what the root word of sukkah is. So they've taken this and they've looked at it with a carnal mindset and said, oh, it means to cover, so cover yourself with something, right? They took branches and boughs and I guess they made a hut. I guess that's what they did, right? No. First of all, You bring the bowls and the fruits because that's your harvest. That's your tithes. Those are your offerings. You bring what you have gathered in and prepare a sacrifice to Abba. You make unleavened bread with that. You make wine with the grapes. You make whatever grows, you're making it as a sacrifice to Abba. But in this feast, we see the real premise was that word sukkah, to cover. Be covered in this feast. That doesn't mean to be covered. Wrap your head up. My head is not wrapped. Priest Ira may have a hat on, but we don't all need to do that. And yes, for the naysayers, it's okay to have a hat on and teach. We've talked about it several times. I'm not going to go through that here. But this feast, the root word of sukkah means to cover or have a defense. Let's get what that means to have a covering. What was Abba telling us to remember when we came out of Egypt? It wasn't that we lived in tents. That's not what he's telling us to remember. Let's get that Exodus 25:1, Priest Ira.
And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they bring me an offering of every man that gives it willingly with his heart. You shall take my offering. And this is the offering which you shall take of them, gold and silver and brass.
All right, jump down to the 7th verse. So we see that Moses was told to tell the children of Israel, bring a free will offering. Not your bullocks, not your rams that you burn on the altar. You must do that mandatorily. But bring your gold, bring your silver, bring your brass. Bring all these things and bring it voluntary. If you want to bring a lot, bring a lot. If you want to bring a little, bring a little. Just bring something. Let's read on.
Verse 7. Onyx stones and stones to be set in the ephod and in the breastplate. And let them make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them.
And this is why they brought in those riches. Not because Moses wanted to line his pockets, but so that Moses and the priest could build a sanctuary or build a temple to Abba, that he may dwell amongst the children of Israel. Let's read on.
Verse 9. According to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall you make it.
According to that temple that's in heaven. Moses, I showed it to you, went up in the mount, told you, write down all the details, go back down on earth and build a replica. Make like a little action figure. You get a little John Cena action figure. It's supposed to look like real John Cena. This is what Moses was supposed to do. See the tabernacle in heaven and go down and build a replica. It's just a little action. Yeah, it's nice and pretty, but it's a little action figure. It's not the real deal. Let's jump to the 17th verse. And once again, this is to replicate what's going on in heaven. Let's read on.
Exodus 25, verse 17. And thou shalt make a mercy seat of pure gold. 2 cubits and a half shall be the length thereof, and 1 cubit and a half the breadth thereof. And thou shalt make 2 cherubims of gold, of beaten work shalt thou make them, in the 2 ends of the mercy seat. And make 1 cherub on the one end, and the other cherub on the other end, even of the mercy seat. Shall you make the cherubims on the 2 ends thereof.
All right, so this is where in spirit we went in the Day of Atonement. We went up those winding steps into the holies of holies, wherein is a mercy seat, the throne of Abba, where he said he would visit us. And along with that, you had a cherubim, an angel on either side with wings. Let's read on.
Verse 18.
Or skip to the 20th verse.
Verse 20. And the cherubims shall stretch forth their wings on high, covering the mercy seat with their wings.
The cherubims shall stretch out their wings and cover the mercy seat. Now this word for cover, we can bring it back up, is H5526. Sakak. This is the same word from which tabernacle stems from. Covering, to cover. Not a tent, not a rudimentary structure. This was not a rudimentary structure at all. This was angels covering Abba's mercy seat, protecting it, watching out for it, defending it, symbolically showing what's being done in spirit. They were covering or being a tabernacle for the mercy seat. Let's read on. And if you would go to Exodus 13, priest regime.
Exodus 25, latter part of verse 20. And their faces shall look one to another. Toward the mercy seat shall the faces of the cherubims be.
All right. So we see that these cherubims covered or sukkah the mercy seat, brought protection and defense and overshadowed that mercy seat. Now, let's apply that to the children of Israel. What was going on with them? What was their covering when they went out of Egypt? What did Abba want us to remember when we kept the Feast of Tabernacles? Exodus 13, verse 17.
And it came to pass, when Pharaoh had let the people go, that Abba Yahweh led them not through the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For Abba Yahweh said, lest peradventure the people repent when they see war, and they return to Egypt.
All right, so this is the children of Israel making their exodus out of Egypt at this moment. Let's read on.
Verse 18. But Abba Yahweh led the people about through the way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up harnessed out of the land of Egypt. And Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for he had straitly sworn the children of Israel, saying, Abba Yahweh will surely visit you, and ye shall carry up my bones away hence with you. And they took their journey from Sukkot.
All right, so they started this journey in Sukkot, the same place where Jacob built a house to Abba, and he was also covered. Let's read on.
And encamped in Etham, in the edge of the wilderness. Verse 21. And the Most High went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead them the way.
This was the covering that Abba brought upon them, not their tents. Yeah, they lived in a tent at this time, but that's not them being covered. That's not them keeping tabernacles. That's not what Abba wants us to remember. That's a minute point. That's just like history. Yeah, they live in tents. All right, let's move on. But this is the great event that Abba, the angels came and covered Israel like a cloud and protected them from the harsh sun and watched over them and overshadowed them as they journeyed in the wilderness. They did not go and do it alone. This is what Abba wants us to remember in this Feast of Tabernacles, that he is our covering. He is our protection. Let's read on.
Continuing in verse 21. To lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire.
And by night he was there. In the daytime, he was a cloud that just hovered over Israel, gave them shade, and protected them and make sure no danger was coming. And in night, it became a pillar of fire and covered them and watched over them. And they were protected. There was nothing, no harm that could come to the children of Israel. This is what was going on throughout Egypt. And how long did this last?
To give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night from before the people.
He did this for 40 years, all throughout their journey in Egypt, or out of Egypt, in the wilderness, until Joshua crossed into the promised land. The Most High had this covering upon the children of Israel. You think the Most High wants us to remember that we lived in a tent when you got a big angel covering you throughout the whole journey? And the whole highlight is a tent? Come on now. This is the same word for tabernacles. This covering. Abba was our covering. This is what he was doing, and this is what he wants us to remember. Most High don't care about a tent. He wants you to remember that he is your covering. He is your protection. He is your guide throughout this curse of Adam. All throughout the 7,000 years, this is what Abba wants you to remember. Got nothing to do with a tent at all. It's the desert penguins coming in and saying, I think it's a tent. No, it's not, brother. It is a cloud by day, a fire by night. Abba Yahweh sending forth the angels, the cherubims to stretch forth their wings and bring forth covering unto Abba. And they're not like Moses, who will lift up his arms and protect the people. And he got tired and arms started getting weak after doing it for about 2 hours. and curses started coming upon the children of Israel. They started losing the battle. Nah, these are angels. They got their arms, the wings up forever, like a statue. Raise them up, protecting them for 40 years straight. This is what Abba wants us to remember in this Feast of Tabernacles, that he is our covering. Let's furthermore prove that in Exodus 40. We'll pick up in the first verse.
And the Most High spake unto Moses, saying, On the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation. And thou shalt put therein the ark of the testimony, and cover the ark with the veil. And thou shalt bring in the table, and set in order the things that are to be set in order upon it. And thou shalt bring in the candlestick, and light the lamps thereof. And thou shalt set the altar of gold for the incense before the ark of the testimony, and put the hanging of the door to the tabernacle. And thou shalt set the altar of the burnt offering before the door of the tabernacle of the tent of the congregation.
All right. So we see that once again Moses was completing the tabernacle that he was commanded to build, where the angels will be in the holies of holies with their arms stretched out, covering Abba's mercy seat. Let's jump down to the 33rd verse. Please, Ira.
Exodus chapter 40, verse 33. And he reared up the court round about the tabernacle and the altar, and set up the hanging of the court gate. So Moses finished the work.
So once Moses finished the work, something miraculous happened. Something amazing happened. Once Moses put that last stitching of the curtain, set up that last pillar, put that last nail in the altar, what happened?
Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation.
The same thing, that same cloud that was covering Israel, covered the tabernacle of the congregation. Read on.
And the glory of the Most High filled the tabernacle. And Moses was not able to enter into the tent of the congregation, because the cloud abode thereon, and the glory of the Most High filled the tabernacle. And when the cloud was taken up from over the tabernacle, the children of Israel went onward in all their journeys. But if the cloud were not taken up, then they journeyed not till the day that it was taken up.
This is that protection and that covering of Abba. It didn't just cover Israel. It was covering the tabernacle. And anybody that was a part of it received of that covering. This is why it's a Feast of Tabernacles. Stay in this tabernacle for 7 days. Do not leave. Because if you do, you're going to be outside the covering of Abba. And it showed them the way. It showed them what to do. As long as that cloud was there, they are, do not move. I don't care if it stays here for 30 days. Do not move. If you start to see it drift, that's Abba telling us, time to move. Time to go. Pack up this tabernacle. At that time, it was a tent. They would break it down and pack it up, and the porters would transport it. And they would follow that cloud. They would follow that protection. And whatever it stopped, they would set up shop again. Build up that tabernacle and sit there for 7 days. And the cloud would move. That covering would move, and they would go and follow it. And they would pack up, and it would stop, set up shop for 2 days, and then move on. And I'm sure there were some Israelites that were like, it's on the move, man. We've been sitting here for 45 days. What are we doing?
Oh, you know it.
Yeah.
Following the cloud.
Yeah, following the cloud. Most I knew what he was doing. I bet some brothers probably did get up and move. I'm going, I know where it is. I know the route. I got a map. And they would go, scorpions start biting. Locusts would come and start destroying them. Some marauders would come and just destroy them. And probably one survivor is like, I'm coming back to this cloud. I'm just keeping this covered. I ain't leaving this time. This is what they had throughout their exodus from Egypt. This is the covering. And it covered the tabernacle. It wasn't about going into the wilderness somewhere and pitching a tent. The Most High was not covering that. He was telling you, dwell in his house for 7 days and keep this feast. Read on.
Exodus chapter 40, verse 38. For the cloud of the Most High was upon the tabernacle by day, and fire was on it by night, in the sight of all the house of Israel throughout all their journeys.
So, once again, it's that same covering that was upon the children of Israel. It was a cloud by day upon the tabernacle and a fire by night. And it was over the house of Abba. It was over the tabernacle. This is what the Feast of Tabernacles is about. Be in Abba's covering. It has nothing at all to do with a tent. The only reason they were in a tent here is because it was temporary. They were moving. But when Solomon built a house, that same fire came down from heaven. And he said, I am here. Don't leave this tabernacle for 7 days. I am here covering it. And they were living in a nice palatial house. Brothers weren't going out pitching a tent. You're going to leave this beautiful temple with rooms full of gold, pillars of silver, an altar 40 feet high and 40 feet wide of solid brass. I got to go live in my tent. Brother, all right, fine. Go live in your tent and leave this covering of Abba. We don't need you here. Because you're so caught up in this carnal mindset of living in a tent when it was all about the covering, the protection of Abba. This is what Tabernacles is about. Anybody living in a tent, you are not keeping Tabernacles. And somebody might say, they were still living in a tent. So we got to still live in tents. All right, if you're that hard-headed and that stiff-necked, let's prove that this is not what they were doing. Once they left Egypt, once they built a set place in the promised land, nobody was living in a tent anymore. Let's go to Nehemiah, Priest Rashim. Let's go to Nehemiah 7, and to get the context, then we're going to go to the 8th chapter. Let's pick up in the first verse. So Nehemiah and Ezra, they were coming out of the Babylonian captivity, where the Babylonians had sacked Jerusalem, burnt it down to the ground, and the Persians allowed them to go back and rebuild it. So they were building up from nothing, from scratch. From a heap of ashes, they went and rebuilt the temple or rebuilt Jerusalem. It didn't happen overnight. As I say, Rome wasn't built in a day. Jerusalem wasn't built in a day. It took them several years to actually build up Jerusalem to its former glory. Let's pick that up there with that context in Nehemiah 7:1.
Now it came to pass, when the wall was built, and I had set up the doors, and the porters, and the singers, and the Levites were appointed.
All right, so they ended up building the walls of the city and the temple, and so they started appointing the Levites. Let's read on. For expediency's sake, let's go to the 4th verse.
Now the city was large and great, but the people were few therein, and the houses were not builded.
All right, so they had a large city, building up from the ashes again, set the parameters, started building the house of Abba, but the people didn't have houses yet. The people were just dwelling there. They didn't have their own houses. They didn't put wood and stone together to actually build their own houses. Now let's go to Nehemiah 8, first chapter.
And all the people gathered themselves together as one man into the street that was before the water gate. And they spake unto Ezra the scribe to bring the book of the law of Moses, which the Most High commanded to Israel. And Ezra the priest brought the law before the congregation, both of men and women, and all that could hear with their understanding, upon the first day of the 7th month.
All right, so once again, Nehemiah and Ezra, they're like in the same situation as us. These brothers grew up not knowing anything about feast days and high holy days. They didn't know anything about it. They knew whatever the Babylonians were doing, the Feast of Tammuz, they knew all about that. Just like we do, they know all about naming, Christmas, Halloween, we know all about that. We know nothing about 7th month, first day, Day of Atonement, Feast of Tabernacles, nothing. So Ezra and Nehemiah had to come up and after seeing the book and receiving the spirit of wisdom, start teaching the people about these feasts. Like, brother, this 7th month, first day, let's start getting ready for these feasts. Let's read on.
Verse 3. And he read therein before the street that was before the water gate, from the morning until midday, before the men and the women, and those that could understand. And the ears of all the people were attentive unto the book of the law.
So they started reading what we read earlier. Ezra was popping open Leviticus 23, saying, brethren, this is the 1st month, first day. We have a holy convocation. Then we do 7th month, 10th day. Then 7th month, 15th day, we come with our burnt offerings and our sacrifices for the Feast of Tabernacles. And everybody was attentive. They were listening. They were hooked. Let's jump down to the 8th verse.
Verse 8. So they read in the book of the law of Abba Yahweh distinctly and gave this sense and caused them to understand the reading. And Nehemiah, which is in Tirshatha, and Ezra the priest, the scribe, and the Levites that taught the people, said unto all the people, this day is holy unto the Most High, your Abba Yahweh. Mourn not, nor weep. For all the people wept when they heard the words of the law. Then he said unto them, go your way, eat the fat, and drink the sweet, and send portions unto them from whom nothing is prepared. For this day is holy unto the Most High. Neither be ye sorry, for the joy of the Most High is your strength.
All right, so he's telling them, you're coming back to your culture, and you're weeping, you're sorrowful because you had not kept it so long, and that the Babylonians had destroyed you. Don't weep. Recognize it's a feast day. Go and celebrate. Go prepare your meat offerings and your drink offerings and offer them unto Abba Yahweh. Let's read on.
Verse 11. So the Levites stilled all the people, saying, hold your peace, for the day is holy, neither be ye grieved. And all the people went their way to eat and to drink and to send portions and to make great mirth, because they had understood the words that were declared unto them. And on the second day were gathered together the chief of the fathers of all the people, the priests and the Levites, unto Ezra the scribe, even to understand the words of the law.
So after that first month, 7th month, first day, they came on the following day, and they continued to read from the book and teach the people. And this is what they taught them. Read on.
Verse 14. And they found written in the law, which the Most High had commanded by Moses, that the children of Israel should dwell in booths in the feast of the 7th month.
All right, once again, they're reading Leviticus 23 in their day. They're saying, 7th month, 15th day, we must dwell in booths, or we must be covered. And right now, nobody has houses. Nobody has homes. We have to make a change to that. Let's read on.
Verse 15. And that they should publish and proclaim in all their cities and in Jerusalem, saying, go forth unto the mount and fetch olive branches and pine branches and myrtle branches and palm branches and branches of thick trees to make booths, as it was written. So the people went forth and brought them and made themselves booths, every one upon the roof of his house and in the courts of the house of Abba Yahweh, and in the street of the water gate, and in the street of the gate of Ephraim.
All right, so now you see people coming, and when they brought in their harvest from the olive branches, from the thick trees, and all the trees that were producing fruit at the time, they said, you know what? I don't have a house. I'm going to go ahead and make my own house today. I'm going to build a house because I don't want to be uncovered in this feast of covering, this feast of Tabernacle. So they went and built houses. Now, some of them had their own house, and they went out in solidarity with the brothers that didn't, and started going on their house and started building their own little huts. And some people were in the courts and started building a house. Some people just popped a tent wherever in the streets. Yeah, brothers popping a shelter because they didn't want to be uncovered in this feast. But here is the kicker here. For brothers that think that you must dwell in a tent, anybody righteous is going to dwell in the tent on Tabernacle. Let's read on.
Verse 17. And all the congregation of them that were come again out of the captivity made booths, and sat under the booths. For since the days of Yeshua, the son of Nun, unto the day had not the children of Israel done so.
Look at that. From the days of Joshua up until the times of Ezra and Nehemiah, Israel did not do so. That's a powerful point right there. Remember what we talked about. Moses had a tent, and they all lived in tents because they were in an encampment. You're not going to build a house for a temporary place that you live in. So they all had tents, and they would break it down, and they would bring it to the next location and set it back up. And even Abba's house was a tent. And they would set it up, and Abba dwelt in a tent. with the children of Israel. He covered it with the cloud by day and the fire by night. And then they would break it down and move to the next place and set it back up, and they lived in a tent all the way until Joshua. And Joshua would do the same thing. He was charged to bring forth conquest into the land of Canaan and establish it for a land for Israel. He was still on the move. So he would conquer a place and set up the temple. And then when they moved on to the next place, they would break it back down and go and conquer the next place. And so on until they conquered all the land of Canaan. And once it was conquered, they set up the altar in one place, and that was it. There was no more moving. There was no more picking it back up. Living in a tent at Tabernacles ended with Joshua. And from the time of Joshua to the time of Ezra and Nehemiah coming out of the Babylonian captivity, nobody was living in a tent in Tabernacles. Read that again, Priest Rasheen.
Nehemiah chapter 8 and verse 17. And all the congregation of them that were come again out of the captivity made booths and sat under the booths. For since the days of Yeshua, the son of Nun, unto that day had not the children of Israel done so.
If you go to 1 Kings 7 and 51, Priest Ira. Since the days of Joshua, up until Ezra and Nehemiah, nobody was living in a tent in Tabernacle. Nobody was doing that. So what, were all these brothers between Joshua and Ezra wicked? On the contrary, Solomon had one of the best documented tabernacles ever. And it says he wasn't living in a tent. By the standards of people today, of the desert penguins, Solomon would have been wicked for not pitching a tent and laying in a tent during tabernacles. And all the children of Israel would have been wicked. Said David wasn't living in a tent. And he's the covenant bearer. Said his heart was perfect. And all these righteous kings after them. Hezekiah. Think Hezekiah was perfect with Abba and not keeping his feast? You think Josiah was perfect with Abba and not keeping his feast as accordance to how they were supposed to be done? So from the days of Joshua up until Ezra, these righteous people were not living in a tent during their Feast of Tabernacle. Let's see what instead Solomon was doing in that great monumental event called the Feast of Tabernacle. 1 Kings 7, verse 51.
So was ended all the work that King Solomon made for the house of the Most High. And Solomon brought in the things which David his father had dedicated, even the silver and the gold and the vessels that he put among the treasures of the house of the Most High.
All right. So we see that Solomon at this point is completing the building and the construction of the actual house of Abba. Now, he didn't have an actual physical structure. Before, David had made a pavilion. He made a little section for him, but it wasn't a house. It wasn't this great major masterwork that Solomon built. Same thing with after Joshua. They still had the tabernacle living in a tent with boards and all those things, but Solomon actually brought it into a house, an actual hardened structure. Let's go over to the next chapter, pick up in the first verse.
1 Kings chapter 8, verse 1. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel, unto King Solomon in Jerusalem, that they might bring up the ark of the covenant of the Most High out of the city of David, which is Zion. And all the men of Israel assembled themselves unto King Solomon at the feast in the month Ethanim, which is the 7th month.
So now we see that Solomon built this construction and commanded everybody to come for the feast of the 7th month. We already know what that is. It's not just some random feast. They came for essentially all the feasts of the 7th month. The memorial blowing of trumpets, Day of Atonement, and the Feast of Tabernacles. They all came and gathered in the temple at that time. Let's read on.
Verse 3. And all the elders of Israel came, and the priests took up the ark. And they brought up the ark of the Most High, and the tabernacle of the congregation, and all the holy vessels that were in the tabernacle, even those that the priests and the Levites bring up. And King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel that were assembled unto him were with him before the ark, sacrificing sheep and oxen that could not be told nor numbered for multitude. And the priests brought in the ark of the covenant of the Most High unto his place, into the oracle of the house, to the most holy place, even under the wings of the cherubims.
So they brought the ark into the holies of holies that Solomon built. And when Moses built the ark, he had cherubims stretching forth their wings, covering the ark. And Solomon brought it to a bigger room, a bigger cherubims covering that ark. Following that same mindset for tabernacle, that covering that the Abba and the Elohim bring to the children of Israel. Let's read on.
Verse 7. For the cherubim spread forth their two wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubims covered the ark and the staves thereof above.
Once again, we see that same word for covering. We can bring that back up. Sukkah, and the root word being sakat. The covering. The same thing that we saw in the Feast of Tabernacles. The same thing that happened with Moses when they built the tent for the house of Abba. Abba's spirit covered it and protected it. And they dwelt in this house during tabernacle. Not a tent, but this house of Abba for that Feast of Tabernacles. Wherever that covering was, this is where they were. This is where they were to stay. Let's read on.
Verse 8. And they drew out the staves, that the ends of the staves were seen out in the holy place before the oracle, and they were not seen without. And there they are unto this day. There was nothing in the ark, save the two tables of stone, which Moses put there at Horeb, when the Most High made a covenant with the children of Israel, when they came out of the land of Egypt. And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Most High.
The same thing that happened to Moses when they were in the Exodus leaving Egypt, the same thing happened to Solomon. Remember, right when Moses completed the building of the temple, the cloud of Abba started to come and fill the house. And that cloud was a covering, a sukkah for the temple. The same thing happened with Solomon. Once he finished building the house and kept the tabernacles, Abba's spirit came and covered the house. In the cloud, the glory of Abba filled that house. Let's read on.
Verse 10. And it came to pass, when the priests were come out of the holy place, that the cloud filled the house of the Most High, so that the priests could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of the Most High had filled the house of the Most High.
For times they jump down to the 63rd verse. We're not going to read it, but we see not only did that cloud come, but that pillar of fire came too. Talked about when Moses or when Solomon was praying, fire just came from heaven and consumed the sacrifice, showing that duality, that Abba was there, his spirit was there covering this place. And this is what Tabernacles is about. This is what we are to remember. And Solomon indeed remembered it. He had a visual representation to remember it. He could not forget. The physical cloud came and covered the house and filled it with Abba's glory. And then fire came down from heaven and covered the house as well. The same thing that happened with Moses happened with Solomon. But the difference here, Moses did indeed have a tent, but Solomon had an actual structure, a house. This has nothing to do about the structure that you're living in. This has all to do with Abba being a covering to the saints. This is what Tabernacles is about. And you dwell wherever that covering is. If that covering is in Biloxi, Mississippi, we're going to go to Biloxi, Mississippi and dwell there. But that's not where the tabernacle is. Let's read on in the 63rd verse, Priest Ira.
And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto the Most High, 22,000 oxen, and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Most High.
All right, now we see another key point here. Abba's house was covered with the glory. They were in the tabernacle, and they brought forth their dedication. They brought forth the sacrifices to bring forth a dedication. Once again, we see sacrifices play a key role here. You are not dedicating a house. You're not keeping a feast of dedication without sacrifices. You need sacrifice to dedicate something. Without that, why are you even calling it a feast of dedication? But this indeed is the feast where they brought forth the dedication of the temple. Let's read on.
Verse 64. The same day did the king hallow the middle of the court that was before the house of the Most High. For there he offered burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the brazen altar that was before the Most High was too little to receive the burnt offerings and meat offerings and the fat of the peace offerings. And at that time Solomon held a feast, and all Israel with him, a great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt, before the Most High, our Abba, 7 days, and 7 days, even 14 days. On the 8th day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king, and went unto their tents joyful and glad of heart for all the goodness that the Most High had done for David his servant, and for Israel his people.
All right. Go to 2 Chronicles 7:1, or 7:4, priest Ira, if you get 1 Maccabees 1:1, priest Rashim. So we see that they offered so many sacrifices, they couldn't even fit it on the altar. And that altar was not small. That wasn't like a little tiny makeshift altar. That thing was 40 feet wide by 40 feet long. That thing's like 7 school buses all lined up next to each other. Offered so many sacrifices, you couldn't even put all of them on there. They had to go outside and burn more sacrifices. And this was the dedication of the house. In this Feast of Tabernacles, when Abba was covering the house, the sanctuary, the holies of holies, the brazen altar, and all of it was dedicated to Abba. It was filled with the glory of the Heavenly Father. This is what was going on in Tabernacle. And we'll see the same thing being talked about in 2 Chronicles 7. Let's pick up in the 4th verse, priest Ira.
Then the king and all the people offered sacrifices before the Most High. And King Solomon offered a sacrifice of 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the people dedicated the house of the Most High.
Once again, at Tabernacles, King Solomon and all the children of Israel and the priests brought forth the dedication of the house of Abba. Let's read on.
Verse 6. And the priests waited on their offices, the Levites also with instruments of music unto the Most High, which David the king had made to praise the Most High, because his mercy endureth forever. When David praised by their ministry, and the priests sounded trumpets before them, and all Israel stood. Moreover, Solomon hallowed the middle of the court that was before the house of the Most High, for there he offered burnt offerings and the fat of the peace offerings, because the brazen altar which Solomon had made was not able to receive the burnt offerings and the meat offerings and the fat. Also at the same time, Solomon kept the feast 7 days, and all Israel with him, a very great congregation, from the entering in of Hamath unto the river of Egypt.
So with the dedication of the temple, you kept the feast for 7 days. And you'll see that this 7 days is in fact the dedication of the temple. These go hand in hand. These are not two separate events. Solomon's not doing a dedication and tabernacles. Tabernacles is the dedication of the temple. Let's finish that up.
Verse 9. And in the 8th day they made a solemn assembly, where they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast 7 days.
For they kept the dedication of the altar 7 days, and the feast is 7 days. And on the 8th day they had a great solemn assembly, a holy convocation. In Tabernacles is when they brought the dedication of the altar and the house of Abba. The Feast of Dedication is not the feast in the 9th month, 25th day. That is not the Feast of Dedication. 7th month, 15th day to the 21st day, or the 22nd day rather, is the Feast of Dedication with Tabernacle. And on the 8th day, you have a holy convocation. And they'll show you that. Verse 10.
And on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent the people away into their tents.
All right, we're going to do simple math. 7th month, 15th day, Add 8 days to 15. 23. On the 23rd day, they conclude the feast. They conclude the dedication of the altar at the end of Tabernacles. But we're calling dedication something else? We have been so misled by the desert penguins to think that Tabernacle is about living in a booth, to think that, or a hut, to think that dedication is a feast all on its own in the 9th month, 25th day. No. Feast of Tabernacles is about dwelling in Abba's house, being under his covering, and dedicating the temple. This is what Tabernacles is about. But you got people that have no ties to the culture, have no spirit of wisdom, telling you what is, when really they should be an example of what isn't. Let's finish that up and then let's go to that first Maccabees 1:1. Because I know some people are going to talk about, well, I have proof of Feast of Dedication, 9th month, 25th day. We're going to show what that is, Abba willing. Let's finish that up, Priest Ira.
2 Chronicles chapter 7, latter part of verse 10. Glad and merry in heart for the goodness that the Most High had showed unto David and to Solomon and to Israel his people.
All right. So that everybody dwelt in the house of Abba. Everybody dwelt in his tabernacle. They weren't leaving, pitching a tent, as we showed already. Solomon came in that time period between Joshua and Ezra and Nehemiah. Solomon was not living in a tent during Tabernacles. Neither was all this great congregation of the children of Israel. However, Abba accepted their sacrifice and covered the temple with a cloud and with a fire by night and brought forth fire from heaven. You think if they were doing something wicked, the Most High would curse them. But he blessed them and received it. This is what the Feast of Tabernacles is about, the dedication of the altar. Now let's go and talk about the quote-unquote Feast of Dedication and see what it was really about. First Maccabees 1:1.
And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead the first over Greece, and made many wars and won many strongholds and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings, who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die.
All right, so we see the history of the Greek Empire that came and toppled the Persians. And you have obviously this Eurocentric view of things through this Western society that's being set up. They look at Alexander and they call him just that, the great. He was the great conqueror, the mighty ruler. There's so many other conquerors before him that were great. They look at Alexander like he was something special. And the Most High did give him the strength and the power to conquer many nations. But then he fell sick and became ready to die. We're not going to get into details of why. There's some speculation on that. Those who know, they know. But let's get to the purpose of this. We're showing how the Greeks came to power and started conquering many lands. They conquered the Persians, and they conquered by proxy all the lands the Persians owned, which would have been the land of Jerusalem or the land of Judea. Let's go to the 10th verse. Priest Rasheen.
Verse 10. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been a hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have much sorrow. So this device pleased them well.
So now you had, in the stead of Alexander, you start to have Antiochus. And he rose up and started ruling over that section of the Greek Empire in which housed Judea. And many of the Israelites themselves were saying, let's go make a pact with him. Let's go make a bond with him. We see how powerful they are. Let's go to them. And when they made that pact, it was their own detriment, their own destruction. Do not make a deal with the devil. Satan is controlling these nations. Don't go over there and start signing contracts. That will be to your own destruction. Let's read on.
Verse 13. Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen.
They built a gymnasium in Jerusalem. They went and asked, can we do what you do? They said, absolutely. Go ahead, let me show you what our gymnasium's about. You see that butt-naked man right there wrestling another butt-naked man? Yeah, that's our custom. Go ahead and bring that into Jerusalem. You see us having these bathhouses where men just get stripped down and go and take a bath together? Yeah, that's our culture. Go and take that to Jerusalem. When that was not what we did at all. Let's read on. What else did they do?
Verse 15. And made themselves uncircumcised and forsook the holy covenant and joined themselves to the heathen and were sold to do mischief.
And this uncircumcised meaning they took themselves out of the covenant of Abba. They were in covenant with Abba, and then they separated themselves from it and forsook the covenant and joined themselves unto the covenants of the heathens. Oh, you got butt-naked men wrestling other butt-naked men? Put them in a suplex? But I want to do that too. That's some weird stuff, brother. I don't know why you want to do that. But you think that these brothers are so great that you went and signed that agreement to do it. Let's jump down to the 21st verse. We see that they brought in all the customs of Greek. And not just that, not just the gymnasiums, but their sacrifices. You ever heard of Bacchus? Bacchus was a Greek idol that was just about festivities. And you just do whatever festive thing you want to do. You want to go buck wild? You can go buck wild. You want to get beads and toss them to somebody? You can do that. You want to get on a float and start dancing? You can do that. Oh, that's Mardi Gras. It's the exact same thing, though. That is the history of Mardi Gras. That's the history of Carnival. All of this great heathenism is what the Greeks set up. And the children of Israel were doing that in Jerusalem. Had all those pearls and beads and tossing them at each other. Probably had French bands going and playing music and trumpets and dancing in Jerusalem. Let's read on. Verse 21.
Verse 21. And entered proudly into the sanctuary.
And it wasn't enough to just set up their gymnasiums and their culture in Jerusalem. Antiochus said, let me walk in that sanctuary. Let me walk in that holy place that Moses and Solomon built and that Ezra and Nehemiah came and rebuilt. Let me walk in there. And what did they do?
And took away the golden altar.
Took the golden altar of incense. Struck it from its post and carried that away. What else?
And the candlestick of light and all the vessels thereof. And the table of showbread and the pouring vessels and the vials and the censers of gold and the veil and the crown and the golden ornaments that were before the temple, all which he pulled off.
Jump to the 44th verse. So they went and stripped the temple bare. It's just an empty house. That's like, hopefully this never happened to anybody, but you come home, somebody burglarize your house, and it's just empty space. I had a couch there. I had a flat screen, a 55-inch. I had my heirloom dresser right here that my grandmother had. Her great-grandmother is gone. And you just see the little spot where it was. Gone. That's what the temple looked like back then. Furnished with all these beautiful things. They just went and stripped it down. They give me them candlesticks. Give me that altar. Give me that pillar of silver. Anything of value, they took it. And they started desecrating the sanctuary. Let's read on.
First Maccabees chapter 1 and verse 44. For the king had sent letters by messengers unto Jerusalem and the cities of Judah that they should follow the strange laws of the land.
And not only did they strip the temple bare, they said, follow after our custom. The sacrifices we do, you're going to do them. Your covenant, you're not going to do it. Let's read on.
Verse 45. And forbid burnt offerings and sacrifice and drink offerings in the temple, and that they should profane the Sabbaths and festival days, and pollute the sanctuary and holy people, set up altars and groves, and chapels of idols, and sacrifice swine's flesh and unclean beasts, that they should also leave their children uncircumcised and make their souls abominable with all manner of uncleanliness and profanation, to the end that they might forget the law and change all the ordinances.
All right, jump to the 54th verse. We're jumping around here. But we see that they went and not only set up their culture, they outlawed and banned the culture of the Israelites, banned the Holy Covenant, just like they're doing today, telling us it's nothing, it's meaningless, all this stuff is fake, all to get you to forget about it. But they were a little more severe back then. You caught circumcising your baby. You and the baby were getting it. They were taking that baby and hanging them up in the streets. They were great barbaric people, and they were bringing that barbarity unto the children of Israel. And anybody that wanted to keep the covenant, they were feeling it. The only option was to follow after the ways of the Greeks and engage in their abominations. Let's read on.
Verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month of Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side.
So now it got so bad that they went inside the temple and set up an abomination to make Israel desolate on their holy altar, the one that was supposed to be consecrated and the covering of Abba. They went on there and set up swine's flesh, sacrificed to Bacchus on the altar that was supposed to be used for Abba, desecrating his holy tabernacle. Jump to verse 59, priest.
Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which is upon the altar of Abba Yahweh.
And they let it sit for 10 days. Now, they definitely didn't have refrigeration back then. And they set up an altar and put a sacrifice on it and let that thing start to rot and stink. And then 10 days later, lit it ablaze and sent that up to disperse that cloud and that fire that will cover the temple, to cause it to no longer be there. Abba's not going to be covering that place where you have an idol altar set up to Bacchus and you're sacrificing swine filled with worms and guts and decomposing. Most High is not going to dwell in that tabernacle. They did this knowing that it would bring forth destruction and desolation upon the children of Israel. This is how much they hated us and sought to destroy us. Let's read on.
Verse 60. At which time, according to the commandment,
For time's sake, go to the 62nd verse.
Howbeit, many in Israel were fully resolved and confirmed in themselves not to eat any unclean thing. Wherefore they rather to die, that they might not be defiled with meats, and that they might not profane the holy covenant. So then they died.
All right, go to the 4th chapter, 1 Maccabees, and 32nd verse, or 36th verse. So now we see, although all this great calamity was happening in Jerusalem, there were some that were resolved, that were firm, and were like, I'm not walking away from this covenant. You're going to have to kill me before I walk away from this. Some of them being Matthias, some of them being Simeon, and some of them being Judas Maccabeus. And they rose up and went to war with these heathens, went to war with this great empire, and were victorious. The underdog rose up and conquered Jerusalem again. And they dispelled them from the temple. And they went and set up the tabernacle again. With so much piety, they were like, man, this altar we can't even use anymore. Abba, forgive us, but we're about to trash this altar. We're going to build another one just like it. Now let's pick it up right there in 1 Maccabees 4:36. After Judas Maccabeus and his company and his army went and conquered Jerusalem again.
Then said Judas and his brethren, Behold, our enemies are discomfited. Let us go up to cleanse and dedicate the sanctuary.
They said, we've been beating and pummeling them. They're on the outer banks of Judea. Let's go first and foremost. Before we go build our own houses and whatever we want to do, let's go and dedicate the sanctuary again. Let's read on.
Verse 37. Upon this, all the hosts assembled themselves together and went up into the Mount Zion. And when they saw the sanctuary desolate, and the altar profaned, and the gates burned up, and the shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest, or in one as in the mountains, yea, the priest's chambers pulled down. They rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads, and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces, and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried toward heaven.
All right. For time's sake, jump to the 48th verse. Actually, jump to the 47th verse. So you see the scene. They just let the tabernacle go into disrepair. Now, this was over the period of years. This didn't just instantly happen the next day. The Greeks set up the abominations, sacrificed it, destroyed the temple, and think of any abandoned building that you know of. It was the same thing with the temple. Weeds all growing through the courts, through the pavement, shingles falling down, everything just in disrepair. And they weep and they lamented. And they came back, started building it again. Verse 47.
Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple, and hallowed the courts.
All right, now jump to verse 52. So we see they went and built a whole new altar. They were like, they sacrificed pig's flesh on there and abominations. We ain't going to use that one again. We're going to build a whole new altar, and we're going to hallow or dedicate the sanctuary again. We're going to sanctify it. Let's read on.
Verse 52. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made.
So according to the law, which we studied earlier on how to dedicate a temple, they went and did it again for the new altar and for the sanctuary that they just repaired. They had to rededicate it. And it happened on the same day the Gentiles defiled their temple, just a few years later. 2 years later, they went and did it on the exact same day. A day of great promise. Those that know, we won't have time to go through it, but those that know what this day is. That was promised even from the times of Haggai and Zerubbabel, that this will be a great day, a day of great power. Let's read on.
Verse 54. Look, at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the Abba Yahweh of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
All right, so they kept the dedication 8 days, just like Solomon did, just like Moses did, just like all these great men before them did. They did it according to the law. This is not Hanukkah for 8 days. This is a dedication for the tabernacle. Let's read on.
And offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. They decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them. Thus were there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren, with the whole congregation of Israel, ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month of Caslu, with mirth and gladness.
All right, so now we see that Judas was saying, keep this feast, this holy day or high day in the 9th month, 25th day. If you would, Priest Rashim, go to second Maccabees chapter 10. Let's pick up in the first verse. We're going to see this same account and see what Judas said. Now, this is where brothers get Hanukkah from. Now, the word dedication in Hebrew is Hanukkah, but there's not a specific day, a feast called Hanukkah that you do in the 9th month, 25th day. Judas is not Abba Yahweh where he can tell you this is a feast. This is a high day to keep in remembrance. And we do. We have it marked on our calendrical study guide. And those who don't have one need to get it. And we're working on the new one for this year coming up. Abba willing, we got some things planned with that. We're going to talk about that as it starts coming out. But Abba willing, we see that 9th month, 25th day, Judas said, mark this day. Once again, he wasn't like Moses coming down from the mountain with tables of stone saying, keep the feast of unleavened bread. Keep the feast of weeks. He can't change and change the law and say this is a feast to Abba Yahweh. We can make it a day to celebrate. Don't act like it's one of those high holy days. Don't put that on the same footing as Tabernacles, a feast of weeks, a feast of unleavened bread. What is this day? What was Judas doing? Is this a day that we're to celebrate like Hanukkah and say this is a holy day? Get 2 Maccabees 10:1 and get the understanding of what Judas was doing.
Now Maccabees and his company, the Lord guiding them, recovered the temple in the city. But the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels, they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar. And striking stones, they took fire out of them, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense and lights and showbread.
All right, so now we see the same account happening. Judas and his people dedicating the altar, dedicating the temple, building a new altar, setting it ablaze, and bringing forth the dedication. Let's read on.
Verse 4, when that was done, they fell flat down and besought the Most High that they might come no more into such troubles. But if they sinned any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered unto the blasphemous and barbarous nations.
It was so bad, they asked, Abba, I want you to punish me if I do this again. That's a horrible thing to do. What does it say? It's a frightful thing to fall in the hands of Abba. So I prefer that, though, to these barbarous people. Let's read on.
Verse 5. Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day, it was cleansed again.
So on the very same day that the Gentiles defiled it, on the 9th month, 25th day, Judas Maccabees dedicated on the same day, 2 years later. Let's read on.
Even the 25th day of the same month, which is Caslu. And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of the Tabernacles.
Read that again. 9th month, 25th day, they did what?
And they kept the 8 days with gladness, as in the feast of Tabernacles.
As if it were the feast of Tabernacles. They kept this day as if it were Tabernacles. They weren't making up their own thing and said it's Hanukkah. It's a whole new day. No, they said we couldn't keep Tabernacles before, but we're going to keep it now. We ain't going to be lacking without a temple for a whole nother year waiting for Tabernacles. We're going to dedicate it now. Let's read on.
Continuing in verse 6. Remembering that not long afore they had held the Feast of Tabernacles, when as they wandered in the mountains and dens like beasts.
That's what you call a checkmate scripture?
Checkmate.
They were keeping tabernacles like beasts, they said, wandering around in the mountains in a tent. They said, I'm like a beast, an animal keeping tabernacle. I'm supposed to be in the temple. Once again, proving you don't do it in a tent. If you're doing it in a tent, you just like a beast. You just like what Jacob did for his cattle. Set up a little structure for them. All right, go and be Jacob's little cattle if you want to be. But I'm trying to be a son of Jacob, dwelling in the house, in the temple. They were saying we weren't at the temple. We hadn't recovered that land yet. We kept tabernacles 7th month in the mountains, in our tents like beasts, in our dens, in the caves. But now we're going to keep tabernacles. I know it's late. I know it's 9th month, 25th day, but we're still going to keep it just like tabernacles. Tabernacles is the feast of dedication. It's not 9th month, 25th day. We still recognize this day. It is still a powerful day, but it is not a holy day. It's a high day, a memorial day, a day where we remember the efforts of Judas Maccabees, a day where Haggai said he would reap vengeance upon our enemies. But it is not a high holy day. This feast that we're in right now is a feast where we dedicate the temple for 7 days. Let's read on.
2 Maccabees chapter 10 and verse 7. Therefore they bare branches and fair boughs and palms also, and sang psalms unto him that had given them good success in cleansing his place.
So just like Tabernacles, you bring your boughs and your branches and your trees. The fruit that you harvest from the trees in that time, they did the same thing. They kept it as if it were Tabernacles. Remember, they kept Tabernacles halfway. They weren't in the temple. They didn't have the covering of Abba. But now they reconsecrated the temple. They're like, I ain't waiting for Tabernacles. We're going to do this now. And this is what they did. They did it just as if it were Tabernacles. This is what was going on 9th month, 25th day. Clearly telling you they kept it as if it were Tabernacle. Tabernacles is when you dedicate the temple for 7 days, and on the 8th day you have a holy convocation. This is what Tabernacles is about. We must not dwell in the tent, but dwell in the covering of Abba. We must sacrifice the sacrifice of unleavened bread, and we must dedicate the temple in Tabernacle. Now, priest hour, if you get John chapter 10, verse 22, I know more brothers want to go here. Nah, I see proof. Howard was doing Feast of Dedication. Jesus was doing Feast of Dedication. All right, well, let's see what was going on at this dedication. John chapter 10, verse 22.
And it was at Jerusalem, the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. And Yahushua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch.
All right. So we see it says in Jerusalem, it's the Feast of Dedication, and it was winter. Let's pull up the, not the word, but the lexicon, the order of words from the Strongs. Pull up that one where it says this, what was going on here. Pull up the one that says Feast Dedication 1. So we see that it says in Jerusalem, then it says the word for dedication, it says winter. If y'all can see that, those that are online. First of all, I'd like to point out, it doesn't say Feast of Dedication. It says the word ekanidzo, which means, does mean dedication, but not all the time, but majority of the times, they preference a feast by calling it a feast or the days or whatever it may be. In Greek, it was heorte. They'll say heorte atzimos, meaning unleavened bread. Or sometimes they'll say the days of unleavened bread. Or they might even say unleavened bread, but you know what it means. Right here, they just say dedication. All right? Now, let's drop that. Let's go to Hebrews 9. You can get Hebrews 9 and 18. Priest Rashim. If you would, Priest Ira, go to John 7 and 1.
Hebrews chapter 9 and verse 18. Whereupon neither the first testament was dedicated without blood.
There was a dedication there too. Let's pull up the word, the order, and see the words there. The second one. We see the same word, or a conjugate of the same word. Ekanizo, a conjugate of that same word, dedication. Why didn't they call this a feast of dedication? Neither was the first tabernacle a feast of dedication. It wouldn't make sense. It wouldn't support their doctrine. We see here that they have a doctrine to push. Now, if you read this, what's up on the screen, for those that are watching live, they put at this dedication that this means the Hebrew feast of dedication that Judas Maccabees set up. They literally put that in there. When in actuality, it has nothing to do with that. But these Gentiles went and put their fingers on this and told you this is what it means. This is what it's talking about, when it has nothing to do with that. It has nothing to do with that. But look at it. They clearly put in there this word ekanizo, Oh, this is Jews Maccabees feast, 9th month, 25th day, so-called December. Ain't got nothing to do with that. If that's the case, how come in Hebrews they ain't put that? How come it's not feast of dedication there? How come it's just dedicated tabernacle?
And the way they define it, they don't even reverence the day.
Right.
They don't even keep tabernacles.
Right. They don't even keep it. The so-called Christians don't even keep it if it's supposed to be right here. They don't reverence the day. You know, they got this. They say those that are claiming to be us are keeping Hanukkah. That's what they were doing. And that's not what it's about. Let's go and look at this. But to understand what it was being said in John 10:22, we need to go back to the beginning, John 7:1. Now, all throughout John and all throughout all the Gospels that you see the Messiah attending these feasts and teaching and condemning the Pharisees. Right here we see a specific feast. John 7:1. Priest Ira.
After these things, Yahushua walked in Galilee, but he would not walk in Jewry because the Jews sought to kill him. Now the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles was at hand.
So now we see the Feast of Tabernacles. Once again, they use a different word. I believe that word is skenopesia, meaning to pitch a tabernacle. The Feast of Tabernacles was at hand. And they use that same word, aorte. Aorte, skenopesia in the Greek. That Jews' feast was at hand. Tabernacle. All right, so the Messiah didn't want to go up. Or he said he wasn't going to go up because he knew the Pharisees were trying to kill him. Let's read on.
Verse 3. His brethren therefore said unto him, Depart hence, and go into Judea, that thy disciples also may see the works that thou doest. For there is no man that doeth anything in secret.
For time's sake, there's a lot to go in through. And I definitely recommend that everybody reads through this because we can't do this. We can't take up another 2 hours reading from John 7 all the way to John 10. But let's go down to the 10th verse, Priest Ira.
John chapter 7, verse 10. But when his brethren were gone up, then went he also up unto the feast, not openly, but as it were in secret.
So the Messiah did go to the Feast of Tabernacles. He just went secretly at first. So for the first few days, they didn't even know he was there. Let's read on.
Then the Jews sought him at the feast and said, Where is he? And there was much murmuring among the people concerning him. For some said, He is a good man. Others said, Nay, but he deceived the people. Howbeit no man spake openly of him for fear of the Jews. Now about the midst of the feasts, Yahushua went up into the temple and taught.
So now in the middle of the feast, we're still in Tabernacles, right? Remember, it's 7 days and you have an 8th day. So about the 3rd or 4th day, the Messiah started revealing himself and started teaching in this Feast of Tabernacles. Let's read on.
Verse 15. And the Jews marveled, saying, How knows this man letters, having never learned? Yahushua answered them and said, My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me.
He said, because it's not my own doctrine I'm teaching, it's the doctrine of Abba Yahweh. Let's jump down to the 37th verse, Priest Ira.
John chapter 7, verse 37. In the last day, that great day of the feast, Yahushua stood and cried, saying, If any man thirst, let him come unto me and drink.
All right, so now we see it's the last day of the feast. It is the 8th day, the great day. So we skipped over, the 5th, 6th, 7th day. Now we're in the 8th day, that holy day. Now, important part to note, when does a Hebrew day start? Yeah, the night watch, the evening, when the sun sets. So the sun set in Jerusalem, the day started. And Yahushua, once that day started, he cried and said, anybody that's thirsty, come to me and I shall give you drink, a spiritual drink. Let's read on.
Verse 38. He that believeth on me, as the scripture has said, out of his belly shall flow rivers of living water.
All right, so for time's sake, jump to the 50th verse.
John chapter 7, verse 50. Nicodemus saith unto them, he that came to Yahushua by night, being one of them, doth our law judge any man? Said unto him, say we not well that thou art a Samaritan, and hast a devil?
Skipped over something.
Oh,
So verse 51. Or time to say go to verse 53. So we see that Nicodemus was playing both sides, still amongst the Pharisees, but tried to play it cool, like don't cast him to the fire yet. Don't cast him to the wind yet. We gotta hear out his doctrine. Just give me ears. Scriptures say, hear somebody out. So let's play both sides. Well, let's look at the important part, verse 53.
John chapter 7, verse 53. And every man went unto his own house.
All right. So the feast's still going on, but it's nighttime. So everybody went to their own house, got some rest to come back for the day watch, for the rising of the sun. Let's go to the next chapter, the 8th chapter, and pick it back up.
Yahushua went unto the Mount of Olives, and early in the morning he came again into the temple.
All right. So Yahushua, at the night watch, went to his own house, got some rest, because although he was an angelic being, he's in an earthly body, got some rest, woke up early, preventing the sun, as David said. Probably woke up before the sun even rose up and went to the Mount of Olives. He said again. Why would I say again if this is a whole nother event? It's a whole nother day. This is the same day. This is the day watch of that great day of the Feast of Tabernacles. So he rose up again and went into the temple. Let's read on.
And all the people came unto him, and he sat down and taught them.
And once again, there wouldn't be a bunch of people there if it wasn't a feast. So he went up in the day watch of the feast. So now, John chapter 8 is still the Feast of Tabernacles. And this is one of the bad things about having other people work on your book and your information. Why'd you make a break here in a whole new chapter? Who told you to do that? John didn't write it that way. But you came in and said, I think the chapter ends here. I'm going to cut it off here. And that's where we get this confusion with the 10th chapter. We're going to talk about that as we go on. But this is the same story. This is just the morning after. Let's pick up in the 20th verse. Priest Ira.
John chapter 8, verse 20. These words spake Yahushua in the treasury, as he taught in the temple. And no man laid hands on him, for his hour was not yet come. Then said Yahushua again unto them, I go my way, and ye shall seek me, and shall die in your sins. Whither I go, you cannot come. Then said the Jews, Will he kill himself? Because he saith, Whither I go, you cannot come. And he said unto them, You are from beneath, I am from above. You are of this world, and I am not of this world.
So somebody can take this and say, I was getting proud. You're below me. Mm-hmm. That's not what he was saying. He said, y'all are worldly. Y'all love this world. I am not of this world. And if you are filled with sin, you cannot come to the real tabernacle in heaven, right, in this Feast of Tabernacles. You'll love this earthly one and won't go up to this spiritual one. Let's jump down to the 39th verse, Priest Ira.
John chapter 8, verse 39. They answered and said unto him, Abraham is our father. Yahushua said unto them, If you were Abraham's children, you would do the works of Abraham. But now you seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth, which I have heard from Abba. This did not Abraham. You do the deeds of your father. Then said they to him, We be not born of fornication. We have one father, even Abba. Yahushua said unto them, If Abba were your father, you would love me. For I proceeded forth that came from Abba. Neither came I of myself, but he sent me. Why do you not understand my speech, even because you cannot hear my word?
I jump to the 56th verse. So now he's condemning them on their pride on the lineage of Abraham. They're boasting, beating their chest like, yeah, I'm Abraham's seed. While they were wicked and not following after Abraham's message. He said, if you were Abraham's children, you would be doing what Abraham did. They're like, nah, we have our father, Abba Yahweh. And we skipped over the verse, but he said, you ain't of Abba Yahweh, you of your father, the devil, to the Pharisees who were filled with sin. And you shall do the lust thereof. Let's jump down to the 56th verse. that verse 56.
John chapter 8 and verse 56. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it and was glad. Then said the Jews unto him, Thou art not yet 50 years old, and hast thou seen Abraham?
So now they said, Yahushua was saying, Abraham was joyous to see me when I saw him. And Jews were like, man, you like 25 years old. What you talking about? Abraham lived 2,000 years ago. What did the Messiah respond with?
Yahushua said unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, before Abraham was, I am.
And he said, I was there before Abraham. And they got heated. They started boiling. This man is a hypocrite. This man is wicked, is a blasphemer. Read on.
Verse 59. Then they took up stones to cast at him.
I remember this. At this point in this feast, they start gathering stones. I'm about to chuck a rock at this man's head. Let's kill him now. Read on.
But Yahushua hid himself and went out of the temple, going through the midst of them, and so passed by.
All right. Jump down to the 9th chapter. Priest Ira. Continue on the 9th chapter. Pick up in the first verse. So they picked up stones and wanted to stone the Messiah. This is the day watch of Feast of Tabernacles, the 8th day. And Yahushua left out of the temple. Or he left out of the porch. Walked out. All right. Let's go to the 9th verse. Or 9th chapter, first verse.
And as Yahushua passed by, he saw a man which was blind from his birth.
Once again, why is this a whole nother chapter? This is the same story. This is not like a whole nother day passed. This is right after he left the temple on the Feast of Tabernacles, where they wanted to stone him. He left out and saw some people and saw a man who was blind from his birth on the same day. Let's read on.
Verse 2. And his disciples asked him, saying, Master, who did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Yahushua answered, Neither hath this man sinned, nor his parents, but that the works of Abba should be made manifest in him. I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day. The night cometh when no man can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. When he had thus spoken, he spat on the ground and made clay of the spittle, and he anointed the eyes of the blind man with the clay, and said unto him, Go, wash in the pool of Siloam, which is by interpretation sent. He went his way, therefore, and washed, and came seeing. The neighbors, therefore, and they which before had seen him, that he was blind, said, Is not this he that sat and begged?
So they see this blind man at Tabernacles once again and told him, and the Messiah went and gave him sight again. And everybody was shocked. They said, this is the man I was begging for 20 years on the streets, blind. And I even tried to test if he was blind. I slapped him up a few times. He's definitely blind. I know for a fact he's blind. And now he can see. Let's read on.
Verse 9. Some said, This is he. Others said, He is like him. But he said, I am he. Therefore said they unto him, How were thine eyes opened? And he answered and said, A man that is called Yahushua made clay, and anointed mine eyes, and said unto me, Go to the pool of Siloam, and wash. And I went and washed, and I received sight. Then said they unto him, Where is he? He said, I know not. They brought to the Pharisees him that aforetime was blind. And it was a Sabbath day when Yahushua made the clay and opened his eyes.
All right. It was a Sabbath day. Why was it a Sabbath day? Because the 8th day of the feast is a Shabbat, is a holy convocation. So the Shabbat came. Messiah was in there. They wanted to stone him on the Shabbat. But now they're accusing the Messiah for doing good on Shabbat. Nonetheless, he ran out the temple, saw a blind man, healed him. They brought him to the Pharisees on this Shabbat. And now they're trying to bring accusations that he was doing work on the holy day. Let's read on.
Verse 15. Then again the Pharisees also asked him, how he had received his sight, he said unto them, He put clay upon my eyes, and I washed, and do see. Therefore said some of the Pharisees, This man is not of Abba, because he keeps not the Sabbath day.
Look at that. Man did miracles.
Yeah.
They're like, you doing on Shabbat, brother, you wicked. That's why earlier when we said the Messiah was like, you wicked brothers looking for a sign, I'm not giving you a sign. Because he gave it to them and they were still rejected. You working on the Sabbath day. You did a miracle that I could never do on any day on this life. And you did on the Sabbath day, brother, you wicked.
There's no love.
Yeah. That's the real no love right there.
Yeah.
That is insanity. They just love their power and they did not like to see the Messiah coming with a new change of regime. But nonetheless, let's read on.
Latter part of verse 16. Others said, How can a man that is a sinner do such miracles? And there was a division among them.
All right. Now they're divided. If he's a sinner, how could he do miracles? How could Abba work through him? Let's jump to the 33rd verse, Priest Ira.
Verse 33. If this man were not of Abba, he could do nothing. They answered and said unto him, Thou wast altogether born in sins, and doest thou teach us? And they cast him out. Yahushua heard that they had cast him out, and when he had found him, he said unto him, Dost thou believe on the Son of Abba? He answered and said, Who is he, Most High? Or Lord, that I might believe on him. And Yahushua said unto him, Thou hast both seen him, and it is he that talks with thee. And he said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. And Yahushua said, For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind. And some of the Pharisees which were with him heard these words, and said unto him, Are we blind also? Yahushua said unto them, If ye were blind, you should have no sin. But now you say, We see, therefore your sin remains.
All right, so the Messiah's always throwing shots at these Pharisees. They said, Are we blind too? They said, if you were blind and you didn't see my miracles, you would be free of sin. Because you had nothing to deny. But you're full of sin. You are blaspheming the Holy Spirit. There is sin all in you. And it is not going to be forgiven. Let's go now to the 10th chapter. As this chapter ends, we go now into the 10th chapter. Remember, this is all happening at the same day. One in the night watch, and then this part in the day watch. And as the day starts to come to a close, John chapter 10, verse 1, we didn't see anything that talked about they left and a whole new day transpired or whatever happened, or Yahushua left the whole Jerusalem and went to Galilee. We don't see any of that. We see nothing about a change of a day, except when that great day came. John chapter 10, verse 1. And if you would get that 1 Kings 8, we're talking about Solomon dedicating the house. John chapter 10, verse 1.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that enters not by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber.
So he's still talking. They just cut Messiah in the middle of the speech. But now you say, we see, therefore your sin remaineth. Cut. Chapter 10. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the Messiah is still speaking. And you just cut him in the middle of the speech and continue on a new chapter. He is still speaking to the Pharisees in the temple at the Feast of Tabernacles. Let's read on.
Verse 2. But he that enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. To him the porter opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out.
All right, jump to the 17th verse.
Verse 17. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I laid down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. This commandment have I received of my Father. There was a division therefore again among the Jews for these sayings. And many of them said, He hath a devil and is mad. Why hear ye him? Others said, These are not the words of him that hath a devil. Can a devil open the eyes of the blind?
All right, so once again, they said the word again. On that same day, there was another division. We see all these things saying it happened again, meaning on the same day it was happening. It was transpiring. There was a division earlier. There's a division now. They wanted to stone him. They wanted to stone him again on the same day. Now what happened?
Verse 22. And it was at Jerusalem, the feast of dedication, and it was winter. And Yahushua walked in the temple in Solomon's porch.
Now we see it was still the 8th day of Tabernacles. And now came the time when they dedicated the house. They start to bring a close to the dedication. This is not a completely different event. If you follow from John 7, where it says the Feast of Tabernacles, you won't see another day transpire until the end of this 10th chapter. This was the dedication that you do at Tabernacles. This was not a whole other event. This is not, several months past. This is not 2 months past, 2.5 months really. This is not that. This is a poor translation. And they put in here, through a lack of understanding or whether through deceit, that this is Jewish Maccabees feast. A much better translation, we could pull that up again, the first one. If you look at the words here, a better translation would have been, and Jerusalem was dedicated for the winter season. They went and put a poor translation on this and made you think it was a completely different time. And Jerusalem was dedicated in the winter season. Because in Tabernacles, you dedicate it for the whole season. You don't have to do a dedication again unless you're like Jewish Maccabees and you didn't get to keep Tabernacles in that place. This is not a completely different feast. This is Jerusalem, the temple, being dedicated for the winter. From the 7th month all the way up to the 12th month until you do it again in the 1st month. This is what this says. This is why the Messiah went to Solomon's porch. The same porch where Solomon brought that first dedication to the house. It should read just like what we saw in 1 Kings 8. Let's read that, Priest Sheen. Call the verse.
1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 1. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel and all the heads of the tribes, the chief of the fathers of the children of Israel.
We'll jump to the key point. Go to verse 63.
1 Kings chapter 8 and verse 63. And Solomon offered a sacrifice of peace offerings, which he offered unto the Most High, 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of the Most High.
This is how it should read. That the house of Abba was dedicated in the winter. Not, it was the Feast of Dedication. It was the day the Jewish Maccabees set up. No, it should be this. At Tabernacles, there was also a dedication. Because that's what you do at Tabernacle. That's like saying at Passover, there was unleavened bread and saying that's a completely different thing. No, it's the same thing. They're inextricably linked. You can't separate unleavened bread from Passover. Just like you can't separate a dedication from Tabernacle. So why would you say Passover, there's also unleavened bread? Or why would you think that that was a completely different day or completely different feast? It was the same feast. John 10, John 9, John 7, and 8 were the same feast, the Feast of Tabernacles, and the Messiah came and brought forth that dedication. Let's go back to John 10, Priest Ira.
John chapter 10, verse 24. Then came the Jews round about him and said unto him, How long dost thou make us to doubt? If thou be the Christ, tell us plainly. Yahushua answered them, I told you, and you believed not. The works that I do in my Father's name, they bear witness of me. But you believe me not, because you are not of my sheep, as I said unto you.
All right, jump down to the 30th verse. So Messiah started off talking about my sheep hear my voice. And then the Pharisees say, show us a sign then if you Christ. You ain't my sheep. I ain't showing you nothing. And what did they say? Verse 30. Actually, go to verse 31.
Mm-hmm. Verse 31. Then the Jews took up stones again to stone him.
Again. Why would they say again if it's a completely different event? On the exact same day, they wanted to stone him twice. They wanted to stone him earlier. He left. He came back, pick him another rock to stone this man. They said again because it's the exact same day. There's no difference here. This is the same feast earlier when they wanted to stone him, on the same exact day as it comes to a close and as they complete that dedication. John is not talking about a feast of dedication in the 9th month, 25th day. It's talking about Tabernacles, the feast in which you bring a dedication. It is the dedication that you do at Tabernacles. Now, jump down, Priest Ira, to the 38th verse. And if as we start to close it down, Priest Rashim, we get Hebrews chapter 9, verse 11. We'll read that again. John chapter 10, verse 38.
But if I do, though you believe not me, believe the works, that you may know and believe that the Father is in me and I in him. Therefore, they sought again to take him, but he escaped out of their hand.
All right, so on the same day, they sought again, a third time, to go and kill him, but he escaped. And this time, the feast is over, so he completely leaves Jerusalem. Read on.
Nimble.
Yeah.
Verse 40.
Dude knew some ninjutsu or something. It was wiggling around. Yeah. He was ducking and weaving. Let's read on.
Verse 40. And went away again beyond Jordan into the place where John at first baptized.
Now he goes to a completely different place. Goes beyond Jordan. Goes beyond the land where the temple is. Now it's a completely different thing. The feast is over. He's leaving Jerusalem. Read on.
And there he abode. And many resorted unto him and said, John did no miracle, but all things that John spake of this man were true. And many believed on him there.
Look at those two words that we see that show you it's a completely different event. He left and there he abode. You abide somewhere if you stay there for a long period of time. Many people resorted there. A resort is somewhere you stay for an extended period of time. We don't see any of that from John 7 where it talks about tabernacles up to John 10, except after it talks about the Feast of Dedication. This is the first time you see a transition happening. And now the next chapter is a completely different event. But right here you see the end of the feast and Yahushua leaving Jerusalem. When it talked about the Feast of Dedication, it's not talking about what I was about to say a word that might get blocked on YouTube. It's not what the desert penguins are telling us. It's not what the people who, quote unquote, study the Bible and put in the lexicon, in the Strongs, and said it's the 9th month, 25th day. This is all happening at Tabernacle. So we must follow suit and be dedicated at Tabernacle. Now, let's follow the example that the Messiah set up in Hebrews 9 and 11, Priest Rashim.
But the Messiah, being come a high priest of good things to come, by a greater and more perfect tabernacle, not made with hands, that is to say, not of this building, neither by the blood of goats and calves, but by his own blood he entered in once into the holy place, having obtained eternal redemption for us.
Let's follow this example. We don't have an earthly tabernacle to dedicate. We don't have a covenant in which we would sacrifice cattle and bullocks and goats to dedicate a temple. But the Messiah, with his own blood, dedicated a better tabernacle, a greater tabernacle, a tabernacle not made with hands. Nobody came with a hammer and a nail and built us a physical place, because there is a better one. Remember, as we started off, Moses made a rendition, an action figure, so to speak, of the great one that's in heaven. This is the one that the Messiah came and dedicated. We must also do the same thing in this Feast of Tabernacles. Dedicate this holy tabernacle. Let's read on.
Verse 13. For if the blood of bulls and of goats and the ashes of a heifer sprinkling the unclean sanctifieth to the purifying of the flesh, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, who through the eternal Spirit offered himself without spot to Abba Yahweh, purge your conscience from dead works to serve the living Abba.
Look at that. Go to 1 Chronicles 33 and 16, Priest Rashim. If the blood of goats and bullocks was enough to purify a worldly tabernacle, the same way Judas did it, the same way Solomon did it, the same way Moses did it, how much more shall the blood of the Messiah, the Prince, the Word that was here from the beginning, purge that holy tabernacle that's within our consciousness, that we can access through our chamber of imagery? How much more shall that be made pure and holy and dedicated for Abba's use through the Messiah, the Prince himself? Let's get 1 Corinthians 3:16.
Know ye not that ye are the temple of Abba Yahweh?
You are the temple of Abba. You are this holy tabernacle. And on this day, we are to be dedicated. We are to be hallowed so that this temple can be made pure to receive the Spirit of Abba. Just like it was in Moses' day. The cloud came, the Spirit of Abba rested and covered the saints at the tabernacle, and the fire came by night. So shall it be in the latter days. But it's not a physical temple, but the tabernacle that resides within us. Finish that up.
And that the Spirit of Abba Yahweh dwelleth in you.
That Spirit, that cloud that covereth, and the fire that illuminates shall dwell amongst us. We must dedicate the temple, though. Read on.
Verse 17. If any man defile the temple of Abba Yahweh, him shall Abba destroy.
If anybody does not dedicate the temple, the real temple that's within us, if anybody's bringing leaven in the Feast of Tabernacles, in the Feast of Unleavened Bread, I would say, you defile my temple, I will destroy you. This is not some minor event. It's not a small thing to bring leaven in the Feast of Abba. It's not a small thing to be a spot in Abba's feast. Make sure your temple, your tabernacle is dedicated and holy in this feast, in these 7 days, so you will be acceptable on the 8th day. Finish that up.
For the temple of Abba Yahweh is holy, which temple ye are.
You are the temple. The temple is within you. Just like Solomon hallowed the temple or made it holy, just like Moses hallowed the temple, just like we were Greeks and Romans and Babylonians and Americans, having a defiled temple filled with Christmas trees and ornaments, Easter bunnies and Halloween pumpkins. We need to be like Judas Maccabees, strip all that stuff down, destroy all of that, and build it up anew and be dedicated to Abba Yahweh in this Feast of Tabernacle. This is indeed the true Feast of Dedication. So let's keep it with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. That's going to close down the class for today. Let's be mindful to keep this feast from the 7th month, 15th day, which we are in today, all the way up to the 23rd day, the 8th great day. We'll open the floor for any questions. If there's anybody in the audience that has any questions, and anybody online that has any questions as well, now's the time to pose them. I'll be willing to priesthood is going to answer them. All right, no questions? I guess that was abundantly clear. All praise to Abba. All right, we'll give it a moment. I know there's a little delay on YouTube. We'll see if anybody has any question that come up. I'm no forcing now. I can definitely going to use a restroom break, but, you know. I'll be here. I'll be here for some questions. I'll be willing. All right. All right, well, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and get ready and keep the feast. We are in, once again, right now. If you're watching the class, right now, we are in the Feast of Tabernacles. Let's be ready to keep it. Okay. We got a question that came up? All right, what's the question?
All right, we have a question essentially saying, what calendar are we using?
We're using the lunar Babylonian calendar.
Gregorian?
Yeah. Nah, not at all. If you're following the Khazars, you would indeed be doing a lunar Babylonian calendar. But we use the calendar that was given by the Spirit of wisdom to Enoch. He was shown the rotations of the years, how there's the intercalary days, and they mark the different seasons, and how many things come about and change by the rotation of the sun and the stars, and how the moon comes to bring forth agriculture and to reflect the rays of the sun. So we use I don't even want to call it an Enochian calendar because that guy gives the bad image. It is a calendar that the Heavenly Father instituted since the fall of Adam to count these days of the curse. And that calendar, Enoch had understanding of it, Solomon had understanding of it, and all these saints had understanding of this calendar. And we see that the autumnal equinox came and marked the start of the 7th month. You don't start the 7th month with the moon. You even have Israelites following, once again, the desert penguins talking about, oh, we wait till the first new moon in spring, and that's when we start our year. You wait till the new moon in spring? So you just say spring is arbitrary time, and you wait till a new moon in there to start it? No, that's not how it works. We follow after how the sun rotates and brings forth the cycles of the year, and at the vernal equinox, when we start our year. And 6 months later, at the autumnal equinox, we start the 7th month and bring in the feast of the 7th month. So hopefully that answered the brother's question.
All right, we got another question from Brianna Dukes. Knowing this is a busy time of the feast, will we receive the calendars for next year if we bought it a week ago?
All right. Well, the calendars out shown on Shechaniah are the former year's calendars. But they're still packed full of information. It's a deep, detailed study guide, so we still have it on there. Abba willing, we're working on this year's calendar coming up, where it will be Abba willing digital. It'll be an app. And that way, there is no waiting. You just get the app and you got it. You know, we know that it's a slow process. We wanted to automate the emails being sent out with the calendar link to it, but technology is finicky. It didn't work that way. So since it's the feast, we're probably not going to be shipping any orders or processing anything. Unfortunately, if we get the opportunity, I'll be willing, we would definitely take it. But more than likely, we're not going to be doing that during the feast. We're going to be busy dedicating the temple, staying away from yeast and giving Abba his sacrifices. So that's what we plan on doing during the feast. So unfortunately, we may not get to your order and anybody else that placed orders. But definitely stay tuned for this calendar coming up. You just download it on your phone and go. Abba, we're trying to make it more streamlined, simple for everybody that placed orders.
She came back and said she ordered a digital copy.
We'll see what we can do. As we said, we haven't been able to process orders, but Abba willing, if we get a moment, we're going to try to do as best we can to get that to you as soon as possible.
All right, we have Nicholas Henry. For the Feast of Dedication, will we be able to keep it in the heavenly kingdom perfectly?
Well, in heaven, they're keeping it perfectly already. They've been keeping it perfect for forever. It's a church on earth that is out of whack. That's out of line. And as you mentioned, we are to leave this earthly plane and in spirit join the church in heaven and keep it with them and be dedicated in a tabernacle more perfect than anyone that can be built on earth. And as they are keeping it perfectly, we must follow suit and keep it perfectly as well. Hopefully I answered the brother's question.
All right. We got brother Wyman Barr. He stated that our brothers are keeping it wrong. He comes back in another question saying, why do they go in tents out in the woods? Is this evil?
They go out in tents because a man in a white suit or a black and white suit with curly locks coming on side told him to. This is why they do it. Because we've been deceived and think that sukkah means a booth, a rudimentary structure, and that's not what it meant. As you mentioned in the class, it means a covering. Abba's covering upon us. And his covering is not out in a tent in the wilderness. It's not in any one single place. It's where the saints gather together and offer sacrifices in our chamber of imagery. That's where that covering is. And if you're not doing that, it is evil. You indeed are not keeping the feast. All right. Hopefully answers, or I don't know if it's a question or statement, but hopefully that's.
We got a person, I believe is Gabriella Yasharala. What scriptures back up what that which you stated? I would ask them to point out what he stated. You can message us back to let us know what you want clarity on. Nicholas Henry, another obvious question is, are we Israelites going to be higher than all angels, including the high top tier angelic beings?
The saints are going to be made like Adam. Adam had a place. He was over a certain group of angels, but he wasn't over the archangels. He wasn't over the Messiah, but he was over a class of angels, a set of angels that would come and bow down to him. And I'll be willing, if we make it to that point, we make it to that resurrection, Paul said, we shall judge angels. Yeah, we shall be over them. But first, we got to run the race first. Let's not be so caught up in what the prize is if we're not even running the race. Let's get on the track and run that race. And then we can think, oh, what's the prize going to be? But if you're not even running the race, there ain't no prize for you anyway. Not talking about you, but just anybody in general that's doing this. So there is a great reward for those that forsake the blessings and the comfort of this world and maintain in the covenant of Abba.
All right, another question by, I believe it's Gabriella Yasharala. What is the name of the app?
Well, the app is not released yet. We're still working on it. Abba willing, it's going to come. It's probably going to be House of Wisdom Calendrical Bible Study Guide. So once we talk about it, Abba willing, we're going to be talking about the class. Definitely subscribe. Turn on the notifications so you get notifications every time we go live, so that when we do start talking about it, you will see it and you'll be able to go in the App Store and go and download that app when it's ready, when it's available, Abba willing.
Yeah, if I could add in, still having a hard copy of the study guide is a phenomenal tool. And remember, it is a study guide. So once you have it in your hands, look at the information. The scriptures all filled within it to back everything up. And once you look into it and begin to study to open your mind, there you get to see how to live out this covenant that we are in. You get to live out the scriptures that you are reading and you're studying, and you see how the calendar works. It's seamless. You see how it's in order and the organization of what it is, what it's saying for you to do from this day to this week to next month and so on. And it just, the beauty of it all comes to fruition when you actually look into it, you partake of it, and you put that within you as you are throughout all the feasts, getting rid of the leavens, and the Day of Atonements and getting rid of the leavens again. So all of the things of this world that we learn from, in the Passovers, when learning of the 13 bullocks, the 12 bullocks. You know what that reminded me of was a 12 Days of Christmas song. On the 12.
I ain't gonna lie, it made me think of that too.
Kidding. This is something. It's a countdown. You can see how they separate some things and they just twist things up. Everything in this world is perverted in such a way that they try to make it make sense. But when you have something that does make sense, you compare it. It's apples and kiwis. It is not even the same looking thing, same feel, nothing. So get that hand copy, the hard copy. Get it in your hands. Flip it. The digital copy is going to be amazing. But in order to understand what that's going to be like once that comes out, get the hard copy now, so that way you can ingest that and develop that spiritual temple within you. And all praises, yeah.
All praises, definitely. So this calendar is definitely a study. It's not just a calendar you hang up on the wall and you flip through some dates. There's so much information packed into it that we need to understand how this calendar operates, how Abba wants us, and when he wants us to come to his feast, and everything related to worship. It is essential for all the saints.
Con, we have a few more questions. Brianna Dukes again asked a question. Essentially, she will be unclean during the midst of the tabernacle due to a funeral. Will I have to start dedication over after my uncleanliness from being around a dead person?
So there's two things that would need to be done. There's firstly, a cleaning, a purification for somebody that dealt with a dead body, which is, unrelated to tabernacle. You come on the third day and you bring your sacrifice, a sin offering, and you're washed in the sixth covenant, the water that was sprinkled with the ashes of the red heifer and hyssop. but in the seventh covenant, coming into the spiritual temple and being washed by the Messiah, who was our offering, our Passover, and our red heifer, so to speak. Then on the seventh day, you come with another sacrifice. On the eighth day, you're clean. But we also have, as it is replicating in the summer season, you have an allotment for anybody who's unclean for a certain reason, like this, like a dead body. You had second month, 14th day, and you could keep the Passover in the second month, and Abba would accept it. We have the same thing being reflected here. Eighth month, not the 15th day, but the 23rd day, because that's the great day, you can come and bring your sacrifice for the Feast of Tabernacles, replicating the summer season, how you have a make-up Passover, you have a make-up tabernacle, so to speak.
We have another question as well from Brother Josh. Will the app be available on all types of phones, and can we still get a physical copy of the older one?
So, Abba willing, it's going to be available on most phones, unless you got like a Windows phone or something. But for most people, Android, Apple, Abba willing, is going to be available on both of those platforms. And yes, you can still get the older copies. As we mentioned, the old copy is still on the website at shekinah.com/calendar. If you want one, they're still available. And even some of the previous versions from a few years before, you can still get those as well. And Abba willing, we'll try to keep those available also.
We have another question from Gabriella Yasharala. Do you perform weddings, and do you have a location to worship on the Shabbat?
Yes, we do perform weddings, and we also come together on the Shabbats. But before we do a wedding for a man and a woman, we first tell people and admonish them, you must first be married to Abba. You must be consecrated first in the seventh covenant. There's no marriage between man and woman without marriage between sons of Adam and Abba Yahweh. Without that, there is no marriage between man and woman. The marriage of man and woman must replicate what Abba has done in heaven. So yes, we do perform weddings, but you must first be in this covenant. Then we'll work with you on getting your vows together, getting everything together to actually perform a wedding. And yes, in fact, we do have a location where we gather together for the Shabbats. We're here right now doing the live stream at this location for Tabernacles. So we're here in Atlanta. The address should be in the description of the video if you're looking to come. Usually every Shabbat we'll do a consecration into the seventh covenant for the saints. Anybody that's looking to do it and has already been who has the information, who understands, knows what they're getting into, and is ready to make that step. So Abba willing, we do that every Shabbat for those that are looking to come, and particularly on the feast days like today. So Abba willing, we're going to be here today and tomorrow, and also at the end of the feast, so-called Saturday and Sunday next week. Abba willing, we'll be here, and anybody that's looking to be consecrated and ready and willing and understands, Abba willing, we'll be ready to do it.
And this also stresses the importance of monetarily supporting the House of Wisdom with what is called biblically a free will offering. We talked about the difference between tithes, which we suggest that those people who want to support and want to be a part of the remission of sin and the removal of trespasses and offering the Most High His peace and thanksgiving offering, definitely send forth the corn oil, the wine that we use expressly here at the House of Wisdom to offer oblations. But monetarily, it is critically important that you send that as well. And with that, you are witnessing history. As Priest Yaredun brought out the sequence of events that was happening in the so-called New Covenant, New Testament, you're not getting that anywhere. And then he rendered a quick translation. We are in the throes right now of translating the entire Bible, and you would be utterly amazed. Your mind would blow looking at all the mysteries that the Heavenly Father is unraveling right before us. We need to translate our Bible. We are the only ones that can do it. I don't care if you speak fluent modern Hebrew. That modern Hebrew was created in the 1880s all the way to the 1920s, the 20th century. It is nearly 100 years old. Modern Hebrew by a guy, Eliezer ben Yehuda, a desert penguin. Again, put his little claws on it and say, this means that, and this means that. And you go and subjugate yourself to his thing. That's not even Hebrew. And so nobody can do it like in ordained, authorized Hebrew. And the Most High have us in some of the more salient points. First, dealing with laws, statutes, commandments, Reshith, as some of you already know. And we need to support these efforts. We need to support these efforts. And so when it's finished, Abba willing, obviously everybody will be the greater for it. We have in the city of Adam where we're going to be walking step by step through certain courses. One of them is going to be the translation so that everybody can immediately get, this literature that was reserved for you and I in these latter days so that we can get victory over the captivity of the world. So definitely support. If you've been enriched by these classes that you've been getting from YouTube or Spreaker or wherever you've been getting it from, kind of think about what happened if YouTube turned around and just say, hey, we don't like you guys. And they just cut us off like that. It's over. It's gone. Think about supporting, and we're laying down the foundation right now of saying we need our own platform. If I say when they do that, you'll know where to go. Go to thecityofadam.com and get all of this information. And so support us as we begin to support you. It's reciprocity. It's reciprocal. This is how it is done. There are those of us who are so used to getting it for free, sitting back every Shabbat, getting this rich nutrients. And we're just like, hey, it's going to keep coming free. What the Most High spoke about, that there's going to be a dearth, which means a famine of hearing the word. So get it while the getting is good and make sure that you are in a good position to support and you're always getting this information because, trust me, this is the biggest threat out there. The House of Wisdom is being throttled. The House of Wisdom is being shadow banned, everything they can to make sure that we don't get it out to the people. They're doing whatever they can. So don't think that it's a coincidence that somebody new just came across this channel. It just so happened to be that the Most High, the Angelic Federation, allow it to come before you. Don't take it as if this is a freebie coming out. You need to take it. You need to own it. As the scriptures say, buy the truth and sell it not. And so get it. Support. Send forth the tithes. Get the calendrical study guide. Sign up on the City of Adam. If you're serious about this, come and get consecrated. Become a member of the House of Wisdom because guaranteed, according to prophecy, we are in the last days. The Heavenly Father is not about gathering billions upon billions of people. He expressly spoke about a remnant, a small amount. When you really think about a remnant, think about baking a cake. You got the batter. You take all the batter out, and that stuff that's on the rim, the Father said, give me that. Give me that. When you give it to the children, they lick the bowl. That's how, small it is. That Most High said, give me the bowl. That's what I want. You can have all the rest of it. He said, this world was made for many. The world to come is made for few. Abba willing, on the schedule, you want to talk about what's on the schedule for tomorrow?
Abba willing, throughout this feast, as we give the Most High's oblation and sacrifice, we will be in the house of Abba, bringing forth teachings and edifications similar to some of the things that we plan on having on the City of Adam. So Abba willing, throughout the feast, we plan on giving a sample of some of the classes and courses that you'll find on the City of Adam as we start to grow and develop this site.
Khan. And tomorrow's class, Abba willing, Most High willing, will be the mark of the beast 666. It is critically important that we understand this and we can cut through the mire, cut through all the Hollywood propaganda so you can truly know what is detrimental to you so you can be victorious and overcome the ways of the world. So I give it back to you. We can begin to move on with the class.
So we'll go ahead and shut down the class here. If there are any other questions, feel free to email us, reach out to us, join the City of Adam and talk directly to some of the priests, direct message us, and we can start to answer your questions, and you can join us in the oblations and keeping the Feast of Abba. So in this Feast of Tabernacles, remember, there's a list of things that we must do. Abstain from leaven, of malice, guile, wickedness, and hypocrisy. Be unleavened. Eat the bread of sincerity and truth. We must be in the covering of Abba, in his house, in his temple. And also, we must dedicate the temple. That temple is us. And we must be dedicated to keep this feast for 7 days so we can be accepted on the 8th day and give Abba Yahweh a sacrifice made by fire according to the 7th covenant of David. Peace and blessing multiply amongst all the saints. Shalom.
Shalom.